Order. This is the Teaching and Learning Committee meeting for the School District of Waukesha. Today is Tuesday, June 3rd. Can we start by verifying that the meeting's been properly posted?
Yes.
Thank you. To begin, I'd be seeking approval of the Teaching and Learning minutes from the May 6th meeting.
So moved. Second.
Thank you. Any comments or concerns? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, passes 5-0. Moving on, we have an opportunity for public comment. We have one speaker this evening. Because there are 6 speakers or less, speakers will be notified at 3 minutes, but allowed up to 5 minutes to complete their comments. We expect our speakers to honor the time limit, refrain from using any inappropriate language, and be respectful in their comments. Speakers who do not meet these expectations may be prohibited from speaking at future board or committee meetings. Speakers are here to address the board, not the audience. The school board and this committee does not endorse any comments made by members of the community tonight. We'd like to remind our community members of the impact of their words on others and that our children are watching. We commit to communicating with you in respectful and productive ways and ask that you do the same. We also expect that the audience will be respectful of the speaker and of the board and refrain from responding with verbal comments, cheering, applause, or other behavior that will detract from the meeting. Please note that no obstructions can be created between the board and the audience, visual aids cannot be used, and the area behind the speaker and podium should be clear during public comment. Also, to respect our speakers and meeting participants, please silence your cell phones. Welcome to the podium, Dan Prothero.
Better? Okay. I'm here tonight because later on in the agenda, you guys are going to be taking a look at a proposed couple of new middle school schedules. And I'm here to ask you to consider increasing the instructional minutes in that middle school schedule. I'm sure you're all aware, DPI is now counting instructional hours, not days. And so a group of teachers and other staff members were sitting around, were like, how come we've got so many days this year, and how come other neighboring districts in our county and even our conference are getting out a week ahead of us? And some might say, oh, we've got too many in-service days or this or that, but the fact of it is, when we started digging in the numbers and we used the DPI calculator, it turns out that the middle school schedule at the middle schools, excluding STEM, they don't have enough instructional minutes for grades 7 and 8. So DPI is requiring 1,050 minutes for grades 1 through 6. And so in that case, the elementary schools are technically exceeding the number of instructional hours this year by almost 80 hours. Conversely, the high schools, we are also exceeding by over 80 hours. The middle school it's grades 7 and 8 that the focus is really at. And they're required to have 1,137 hours. So when you look at 1,137 instructional hours, grades 7 and 8 aren't exceeding it by much, because those number of minutes in that middle school schedule is more aligned with the elementary than with the high school. And what DPI has done is they've drawn a line saying, hey, grades 1 through 6, you need 1,050 minutes, whereas grades 7 through 12, you need 1,137 minutes. The problem is our schedule's not updated for that. So we look at different kinds of flexible scheduling and things to enhance it for our families, our students, our staff, and there really is no room for creativity looking at the current structure. So with that being said, the solution, it jumped right out at us. We were looking for all kinds of things, and the solution was we have to increase the instructional minutes in the day of middle school. So we calculated this based on a 6.5-hour day, not counting lunch. The elementary, they have no problem meeting their minutes. But at the high school, we've got a 7-hour day, not counting the lunch, which is what we need. But the middle school is at that 6.5-hour day, not counting lunch. They need to be at a 7, which means they need a day that starts and ends 7.5 hours at school, taking out the half hour for lunch. So you're going to look at a couple of schedules, and I looked at the sample blocks and all that stuff. I'm not here for that. You guys can pick which schedule is best for you, but what we do need to look at, thank you. What we do need to ensure is the fact that it's a good 7.5 hours from the moment they start to the moment they end. And then they pull out that half hour for lunch, then transition time. That keeps them on par with the high school number of hours. And once that happens, we can get really, really creative with our calendar. We can do some things like Arrowhead did. They had a week off at Thanksgiving. Students, staff, families planned for travel. They were able to build that in because their schedules aligned. So all I'm asking is take a peek at it. I'm sure you would have anyway. But when you look at that, the start times and the end times really do have to, it needs to align more with the high school than the middle school. And by doing so, yes, sixth grade will be putting in more time than required per DPI. But that's the only grade that will be impacted as opposed to all of elementary and all of high school plus a grade. So that's it. Thank you so much.
Thank you. All right. First topic under general business is request to take action to approve the School District of Waukesha educational standards. Mrs. Genderman, do you want to introduce us?
Good evening. So tonight we are bringing forward an annual piece where we look at the Wisconsin or the Waukesha educational standards. I wanted to share tonight that like in years past, we've brought them forward. We have them as part of our annual notices to families and staff on our district website. And I was just going to bring that up. In addition to that, as part of the annual notices, we also have the standards articulated on our website. So just give me 1 minute and I'll show that. So here what I'm showing is part of the annual notices for a variety of things that we have requirements to do an annual notice. This is where we put all of our information for families and we can refer them back to. When it comes to student educational standards, given our discussion tonight and possible action, then this would be revised as far as the year. But we include information here about the annual notice and the requirement, and then we also have a link to the academic standards. You can also get to these academic standards through the teaching and learning portion of the website, but here you would be able to open up and you could see literacy, looking at some DPI standards. It takes us right to the resources themselves. So with that, I will entertain any questions. Like I said, this is more of an annual piece that is brought forward, but I did want to highlight those two components that are part of our website and that we use in other communication that refer people back to those pieces.
So this is an annual recurring topic for the board, actually for every board. So we've done this before. The literacy piece obviously is new. It's a new addition to the content that's posted. We're going to continue to talk more about literacy, but are there questions about where to find the standards and what's being released? Okay. Mrs. Koenig?
I just have a question. I just clicked on a few, and if a parent or someone clicks on something and it says access denied, is that something that their school email would give them access to?
No, if it is on the public website, it should be open, whatever it is. Oftentimes, if we link right to another outside resource, like I just clicked on literacy, if we linked to a different website, say within DPI, and they change that link, we don't get a notification. So if there's something that isn't working, then we can go back and double check and make sure that we have the most up-to-date links for that.
Okay.
If it is an internal document, we would do the same, and that needs to be open. So if you want to just jot down which ones.
Sure. Yeah, I found.
Okay.
Just one I clicked on randomly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Zenobia?
Yes, I would move to approve the annual notice of student educational standards as required by the 2015 Wisconsin Act 55 to notify the parents and guardians of students enrolled in the school district of student academic standards that will be in effect for the 25-26 school year.
Second.
Further discussion? Okay, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes 5-0.
Thank you for that. Just as one of our next steps, we'll, I spot checked some of the website links, but we'll go through them again, just to double check. So thank you.
Okay. If there are any things that people notice specifically, please pass that along, and let's make sure that everything is live by next Wednesday. Thanks. Okay. Moving on, discussion and possible action on new board policy 5411, third grade promotion and retention. So I'd like to start by catching us up from where we were last month, and then I'm going to turn it over to Mrs. Gennerman a little bit. After we met last month, we had a good discussion. I think we had a good discussion at the full board as well. Mrs. Gennerman and I actually spent a considerable amount of time revisiting the model policy that the DPI had produced, the subsequent policy that Neola had recommended to us, and we also went back and reviewed the state statutes and some of the implementation opportunities I think that we would have. What I attempted to do initially was continue to red and green line the Neola policy as we would normally do if we had a draft policy sent our way. But after kind of digging in on what the DPI had done and the extent to which Neola had somewhat reiterated what the DPI had done, I felt like we needed to start from a different perspective. And so that was shared with you. So all of these pieces were shared with the board, that being the DPI model policy, the Neola recommended policy, what I would put to the table as a possible draft SDW policy, along with the Act 20 legislation, and also the 5410, because what we do with this 5411 in terms of promotion will be complementary to 5410. So I wanted to make sure that everybody had a chance to look at all of that. And then Mrs. Gennerman and I worked on trying to put some narrative and some guidance behind what you'll find in that policy. And so I'm going to have her go through that. I might interject. And then certainly if you have questions along the way, ask, because this is a lot. And then we can talk a little bit about the timeline of all of this and what it means for what we're asking to pass right now.
Yeah, and also joining me is Melissa Yao, who has been instrumental in this work too, at the ground level. So what I'll first do is just kind of get us grounded around the policy. We wanted to remind everyone that this policy 5411 is new, and it's in addition to policy 5410, like Dr. Piasek had said. So again, it's new and it's potentially an additional one. We are looking at this with the idea that by July 2nd of 2025, the school board adopt a written policy for promoting those pupils from 3rd to 4th grade. We want to highlight too that while we are adopting or looking at adopting this policy now, this would not go into effect until September of 27. And so we could choose that it goes into effect and recommend that it goes into effect sooner. But when we did looked at the many different variations of the recommended policy, we felt it was best for that September 27 to be that effective date. Part of the rationale is that our 3rd grade students who have been getting the science of reading will then be in, our current kindergartners will then be in 3rd grade. Because when you think of September 2027, that's really the 27-28 school year. So we really wouldn't be having these conversations. We'll be having them throughout the whole school year for those 3rd graders, but it won't come till spring of 28. And so there's many dates in this policy, so we're bringing it here for tonight. It would be effective, but not implemented until the 27-28 school year. which is very unusual for us when it comes to a policy. Dr. Piasek really reiterated some of these pieces as far as what we've looked at and what we've been working with, everything from the draft from Neola, everything around Act 20, the state statutes, the model DPI policy. We also provided a sample personalized reading plan, since that is referenced in the policy. We wanted you to know and see how in-depth our personalized reading plans do go into detail for each student. That does require that, so that you have an idea of what is all involved in that when we keep saying that a student has a personalized reading plan, just how in-depth and rigorous that is. So here we're going to start with the policy. Like Dr. Piasek shared, you have it all on one document rather than anything red or green lined. What we wanted to do was just highlight some of the key components. First and foremost, that this is a policy for third grade promotion and retention in the area of literacy. And again, it's in addition to our other retention policy, which is 5410. We put a box around that effective date, just so everyone's clear, and we wanted, rather than just saying the start date of being effective, that would be September 1st, 27, we wanted to clearly specify that it would be the school year leading into fourth graders for the 28-29 school year. What you'll see on this policy is just, we tried to reorganize it so that it was, we felt, in a user-friendly way of walking us through the personalized reading plan, in that there's 2 criteria for promotion to fourth grade. And it really comes down to the grade level proficiency as measured on that state summative or alternative assessment. Currently, that state summative assessment is the Wisconsin Forward exam, and there is not an alternative assessment, but this is written into the language that maybe in the future there may be, and there may not be. For this, we are highlighting that there's 2 of the criteria required. So not only that they are proficient on the state summative, but also that they've completed their personalized reading plan. And we circled that word "and" because there's been lots of debate, discussion, double checking, rereading, revising in more discussion around that one little word "and" how it is such a big impact. Part of the reason this is also impacts our work greatly, the word "and," is that typically up until this year, we haven't gotten the state assessment results until like summer. So this is the first year we actually got them, and to be quite honest, we were told we would get them and we weren't sure, but we did get them. And so we have to be mindful of the timing of when these conversations are all happening throughout the school year, and then when that testing data is coming in. So we're hopeful that that practice of getting the testing data during the school year will continue, and so that we can look at that and the completion of the reading plans together. For this, we settled on some definitions, just because in education there's so much jargon, and even though we can be on the same team, we still have these conversations of what is it that we're talking about when it means, what is a personalized reading plan? What does it mean for plan completion? So some of this, again, is coming from the Neola piece of definitions, and then the model policy. We felt important to add the piece about the at-risk for literacy learning. This policy is really only talking about literacy, and so we wanted to go back to that because it's not referencing math, and we thought that was a key component, especially when we get to the exemptions. Kelly, anything you'd like to add so far?
Not yet.
All right, moving on to the next part. This really speaks to the process of the promotion determination. And so really what we tried to do is, rather than having many possible outcomes, that it really comes to, it's either promotion or retention. And with both of those, students may or may not have additional supports in place. And again, this goes to the process where we're looking at the student does need to complete the PRP or the personalized reading plan and needs to demonstrate reading skills that are proficient on the state assessments. We walk through the process where it's really broken down to very few steps, but we feel that this is very clear and doable on the staff behalf. Again, some of this work around Act 20 is nothing new. We've had students who've been on a reading intervention plan before, so some of this is not new. It's just giving a streamlined process or articulating timelines or definitions a little bit clearer. So the first step in this would be the evaluation, and this is where a team who would be comprised of a variety of people who are knowledgeable about the student's reading performance and instruction and interventions and support history would be a part of that conversation. We'd be looking for that team to look at 8 pieces of information. One of them being all relevant and available data for that student. Another is looking at the good cause exemptions that we will talk about in a little bit. Those really are around if they have an IEP, if they have an EL plan, and all those things, those individual plans in a separate plan are addressing their literacy learning. Another piece is looking at the progress towards the personalized reading plan goals and the documented growth, looking at effectiveness of the previous interventions for this child, also looking at other district policies and guidelines, and then looking at viable alternatives to retention that may allow the student to achieve reading proficiency. An example of that might be summer school or a different intervention. And then in addition, we want the team to be considering additional information that the parent would be bringing to the table, and then ultimately the long-term consequences for either promotion or retention. We want each team on an individual basis to consider all those things for the child. Then ultimately in step 2,
Wait, just hold on.
Sure.
So the review team, so when we take a look at the personalized reading plan as it stands now, and we talk about like the assessments that we're doing, and I've seen some of them where we're meeting individually with these students, is this team a similar group of people that know the student, have been working with them, so recognize them versus looking at KPI numbers on a page?
Correct. The team would be the school team who has been involved in writing the plan, who are trained, highly trained in literacy, the classroom teacher who knows what's happening with the student day in and day out. We'd be looking at their formative and summative assessments that are happening in the classroom on the daily, as well as progress monitoring, diagnostic, universal screening as well.
Perfect, thank you.
The next step in the process, as it's written, is ultimately the recommendation. So based on the evaluation, the district will recommend either promotion or retention. And looking at that, being that second step within there, we have pieces that the parents will be notified of the recommendation in writing when at all possible throughout the whole year. Parents are involved in the conversation, so this isn't a surprise or an end of the year, hey, it's June 1st, and we just want to let you know in writing that we're considering this for your child. So the intent really is to partner with the parents and the team throughout the whole school year, but ultimately that the recommendation would be put in writing to the families. And then here, we want to have a component where if the parent does not agree with the retention recommendation, the student could still be promoted where post-promotion supports are agreed to in writing between the district and parent. So going back to the idea, if the student is retained or promoted, either way, we want to consider supports in place. But as far as this, if the recommendation, if there's a disagreement, this allows us to come together as a team and talk about what are the supports that would be needed, so that that child can be as successful as possible. With the recommendation, we also want to commit to things that are required in the statute. So that would be providing not only the parent written notification, but also the opportunity for students to participate in a summer reading program. We think that's crucial. We already do invite families to engage in our summer reading program, but with the Act 20, we'll be beefing up our reading classes in summer school, and we want to offer those opportunities for families to continue to engage in that. And then also the intensive instructional services, progress monitoring and supports that would be identified in the area deficiencies. So making sure that whether the student is retained or moving forward, we have all the supports documented and discussed. And that's only so far. Thoughts, additions?
Let me just interject and give a little color comment quickly, because I think in the next section, I'm going to ask you to define a little bit more about the EL plans and how those are approached. So you'll see the statutory references in those sections that are required under the statute. So some of that language, we just chose to be consistent with what's there so that we're not inventing our own. Just to reiterate, by the time we get to this policy, the details of the PRP, the reading plan, has happened before this. So that's not something that's captured here. But the statute itself requires that the parents actually sign the reading plan. And so there's communication back and forth. So again, by the time we're to this point, that reading plan has been created, it's been signed and acknowledged, and there's likely been several years of back and forth and trying to intervene. So it sometimes feels like when we're talking about this decision of retention or promotion that we're just kind of jumping right into, is this a surprise? But I just wanted to point that out, that reading plan is covered elsewhere. And then the one other piece I'd like to point out in the information to be considered, I mean, it really is kind of all-inclusive, right? If there's data that's going to tell us whether or not we're moving in the right direction. But I know Jen's moving into the part about the good cause exceptions. Under step 1 in evaluation, we included whether there's a good cause exception that may apply, but also whether that exception has led to a literacy intervention being provided under a different plan. Because I think there's maybe a misunderstanding that perhaps any IEP or any support plan would satisfy the exception. And I think for the purpose of this plan, we want to ensure that there's a literacy support component to that alternative plan. So I just wanted to introduce that before we go to the good cause exceptions. Mr. Zenobia.
Thank you. Just as we're on the topic, so under the recommendation, if a parent were to not agree with the recommendation to retain a student, it says there would be, post-promotion supports. Could that potentially include something the parents would provide outside of the district? Is that what we're suggesting, or
I think
could it be read that way?
I think we'd have a conversation about it, including like if they have some ideas or want to use a certain resource. But then we go back to like, what do we have control of within the school? So summer school, thinking about interventions that could continue for supports, thinking about if some of the interventions weren't successful, maybe we need to consider a different intervention. So I think it comes back to that individual student and conversation around what that could look like. But we just want the opportunity to have a conversation about it, not that there's a disagreement, because at the end, we just want the student to be successful. Melissa, do you want to add?
No, I just want to reiterate that we do lots of times work with parents, and sometimes they choose to add on services outside that they pay for or do not pay for, but might have some additional. But with this, we want to really guarantee, what are we going to do? This is about what we are saying as a school district of what we are doing. There are times, though, when a family maybe does have an interventionist outside, we talk with parents about, can we work together? Can we, bring them into a meeting or talk with them on the phone, see what they're doing so that we can exchange that? Because we want to make sure that for the student, we are all working together and not, causing larger gaps or more confusion for the student. But
Yeah, I mean, and my question was assuming that the district is providing all the
Yep.
additional services they can that student, and they're still saying, no, we probably should retain the student. The parents are like, but if we were to do this, that's within the language of the policy, that's
Yep.
kind of, okay.
The other
And-
piece that we spend a lot of time around those supports is around summer school. We do offer summer school, but even, as you know, the word provide, we can recommend that people sign up and bring their child, but it's optional. And so we just want to continue to offer that and have a well-rounded summer school instructional experience for kids. So we did adjust the language around that from rather provide to what you see here as a consideration of every different students and families, different dynamic pieces.
I just want to clarify too, that the statute is very clear about the supports that need to be required if a student is promoted without completing the reading plan and testing at grade level.
It is.
And that is that written notification, the intensive summer, and then that item B, intensive instructional services, progress monitoring, and supports to remediate the identified area deficiency. That's required by law. So whether they are recommended for promotion by the district because the decision is that they're close and that's in the student's best interest, or whether they're recommended for retention and the parent believes that that's in the student's best interest, that support must be available, and that access to the intensive summer reading program must be available. And then there may be other things. I think that would be great if the parents are also providing additional intervention.
Just to follow up with that, because ultimately, it will come down to the district, the team, the principal, to decide, yes, the student must be retained, all these things are being done, but we're still not there. And that's kind of part of my question is, at some point, if by law we're doing all the things that we're supposed to, the recommendation is to retain, ultimately the decision comes down to the district, correct? I mean, the parents are involved, but
Yeah,
it's a severe case, we'd say, yes, this has to be this way.
ultimately, we're making the recommendation.
Okay. And with what you're saying in Part B, I understand, I'm just trying to fully clarify what that will mean, so I think I got it.
Ms. Garnet?
Well, there's just a little bit more. So, so like Dr. Piasek talked about, we referenced earlier in the policy as part of the evaluation that we do consider those good cause exemptions. So here we have listed A through E, which is really right from the statute. And this really references if a student has limited English proficiency and or they have an IEP or they have a 504. What we want to ensure that even if they have a plan, that we're looking at that student's literacy component of that plan. So that, like Dr. Piasek said, if you have an IEP for possibly behavior, that doesn't make you exempt from all these considerations, and that maybe the IEP team would have a conversation around the student's literacy learning. But we want to make sure that whether it's a personalized reading plan, an EL plan, an IEP plan, 504 plan, we have a lot of plans. We want to be addressing the literacy component because this is about literacy learning. As with anything, we have special enrollment situations that do arise. As you know, we have students who transfer into the district at any time of the school year. And so we just really here articulated that if they're late to third grade enrollment as well as fourth grade transfer ins, really how we would approach that. Oftentimes, it would be great if the student comes and we have their student records. We know if they were on an IEP, if they had an IEP, or even in this situation, if they had a personalized reading plan, what it all entailed, what area of reading they were working on, that sort of thing. But we don't always get that information overnight. And so this is really allowing us some guidance in these situations where a student is enrolled late. And if we don't have any information, that it would just guide us as far as next steps. The other piece too, of course, if a student does enroll, like if they have an IEP or a personalized reading plan, once we get it, of course, we will review it. But the personalized reading plans, they look different across the state from school to school. Ours are pretty robust and very comprehensive, and we're really proud of what we've put together and think it's very informative for families to keep the conversation and partnership going throughout the year. But we have to recognize that if a student does come in to the school district of Waukesha, their personalized reading plan may look a little bit different. And we just oftentimes need the records transferred when a student comes late. So we're just trying to be mindful of that, knowing that kids do move in and out of the system. And so this policy gives guidance to those two situations.
Mrs. Kozlowski.
So the good cause exceptions for me are pretty loaded, because in almost all of the cases, we're going to allow them to be promoted knowing that they are significantly behind, effectively. So what do we do with that?
We still intervene. We do our best with all of our students. We have intervention enrichment blocks, 30 minutes a day for students in fourth and fifth as well, where there is time for if students are struggling in a certain area or not at grade level, that we are providing intervening services for them. So whether they have an IEP and ILP, those students as well are considered for that.
One of the pieces a little bit later tonight when we give an update on the literacy work and then the math work. In the area of math, you'll hear about the work that's being done between special education and regular education, and it really speaks to the collaboration among our team that helps address components like this, that just because they have an IEP doesn't mean like, oh, they go over there, they get their specialized services, and now it's more connected with a regular teacher and the special education teacher, and we're providing them supports together too, and you'll hear about that with the math pieces.
Okay, and then the other piece that I wanted just to consider would be in D and E, where we talk about the possibility that the student has already been retained. But I want to cross-reference then 5410, because one of the questions that I have is, we don't want to, I guess for lack of better words, double retain. But let's say in third grade, we make a decision to promote. In 5410, it says that there's also specific criteria to promote students from the fourth and eighth grade. Is that, so are they then reviewed again in fourth grade for the potential of being retained? Are we retaining once, or would we retain more than once?
Typically, we would not retain more than once, but it's very situational, case by case, of going through, considering all avenues of what might be best for that individual student, and, what is the reason why we think retention might be the best, looking at all the variables, the research around promotion and retention, and what that might lead to in either direction.
And regardless, they still follow a path of intervention.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
So I just want to clarify some of that, because it was some deep learning for me also, and kind of going through all of this. So the good cause exceptions that are listed in our policy are word for word out of the statute. So we're going to need to develop processes for applying, and the word may it's the good cause exception may be applied if these circumstances are met. There's a little bit of redundancy, so like in items 4 and 5, kind of encapsulates the other, but it's really getting at retention for literacy, for failure to complete the plan at any other grade. So if a parent together with staff decided they wanted to retain in first or second grade rather than third, that would apply to the consideration. But then also, so this is 5MB, and then there's 6A in the statute that is the requirement that boards develop the policy for 4th to 5th promotion and then 8th to 9th promotion. And so that's where 5410 is actually coming from, so they kind of stack. And I think we probably need to take another look at 5410 while we're putting this out. And I mean, the good news is we have a little bit of time to refine this, and we also don't quite yet understand what the scope of these different applicable exceptions might be, or how likely it is that we get to this point and how often. Yeah.
So in going through all of that, Mr. Zenobia was talking about the role of the parent. So if I'm a parent and I say, I disagree with the retention, I want to promote, who wins, the parent or the district? Because I would think that the parent would trump, right? The recommendation is the district says, we think we need to retain, and the parent is saying, I don't, but here's things I'll either do, don't do. The district would still provide the intervention services going through that to do all they can to get them caught up. But the district can't mandate that somebody is retained.
Right, the parents would have a big say in this.
Okay.
In either direction, and we would work with them multiple times, and we'd have meetings, throughout the year prior till we get to this end result, where it's not a shock that we talk about what we're currently doing, what would be happening, what are the possibilities. And so, we have lots of hard conversations along the way, and we get there at the end, but we would still then, if the parent did say that they do not agree, we're still going to have to provide
Yep.
all of these resources and say they need to come to summer school. Once again, we can't get them there, but we are requiring it. We would document all of these pieces as we do from the meetings of what our multiple attempts have been and what we have done and how we're still going to then be intervening.
And I think that's great, and just to get to the personalized reading plan, right? This is an extremely robust plan, which is really good to see. But I would look at this, and so we're talking about our kindergarten class right now. So these conversations are starting right now, where the true discussion is the recommendation. So does the personalized reading plan carry over from first grade through third grade? Is it started every year? How is that done so that there is that? I hear what we're saying, that there's constant communication and that there's a plan that is starting from now until really the spring of 2028, when the first class would be eligible for
Right.
whatever this decision would be. I'm just looking at the document as a trail
Yep.
through from now till end that carries forward, that both, so I would expect that the parent and the district is signing every year.
Yes, the reading plan, so students who are currently on a reading plan right now have to meet the goal of their reading plan based on the goal that is set on their progress monitoring. So we'll have at the end of this year some students who get off of their plan because they meet their goal and some who won't, so that will carry into next year. We do our universal screening and diagnostic again. We will look at that reading plan and see if there's any adjustments that need to be made based on additional information, and then they would continue on their plan until they meet that goal and come off.
Perfect, thank you.
Mr. Brooks?
Thank you. Yeah, first of all, I appreciate all the work that went into this revision and this whole process. I think, it's a lot to first have to go through the actual statute itself to kind of figure out what these things mean. and then having to decide how it's best to apply that to our school district. I really appreciate all the revisions. I think this is significantly stronger than what we started with a month ago, and certainly stronger than what the DPI model policy is. So when it comes to, Ms. Kozlowski kind of covered a lot of my questions when it came to the parental piece. And what I appreciate about this policy is that it's putting the focus on making sure that we're doing what's best for that child and making sure that we're not just passing along a student who's not ready, but we still give that parent an option to advocate for their child if they believe that that's in the best interest of their kid, and we give them that voice. So if we were to be in a situation where a parent disagrees with the recommendation and they want to still promote the student, that promotion is only, for lack of a better term, official once once the district and the parent agrees upon the supports for promotion, correct? Okay. Then a couple of the other things that I just wanted to call out that I really appreciate that are in here. So the DPI model policy on retention, it emphasizes on, they put an emphasis on explaining all of the consequences of retention. I appreciate that we're also including a discussion around the long-term consequences of promotion as well, if we're promoting a student who isn't quite at grade level. Because I think it's important to give both of those perspectives so that a parent and the support team can make that informed choice. And I appreciate the fact that we're allowing the parent to provide additional information to assist the district in the recommendation, right? Sometimes there are things that happen, maybe a student's doing really well in their progression, and all of a sudden there's a extreme life event at home that is not within any of our control that just disrupts that learning. And maybe there's a reasonable discussion around, well, if this didn't happen, the student would have tested out of his plan. Can we make an exception? I think those things are really important to factor in here. So, no, I appreciate this. I think this is great. I just am very thankful for all the work that went into this.
Eric, to your first question, in the middle of page 2, under the headline, promoting students with incomplete personal reading plans, I'm sorry, it's actually under the recommendation, where right above that it says, if the parent does not agree with the retention recommendation, the student may still be promoted, where post-promotion supports are agreed to in writing between the district and the parent. So to your point, it's not obviously the board, the district holds very highly parental rights and parental say over their children's education. It will be important, though, when we get to that point, and again, none of this should really come as a surprise because we'll be working through these PRPs for some time, that if we get to a point where there is a strong recommendation for retention, there needs to be a solid agreement. And I would believe that may include more than the supports that are mandatory under the law. Yeah, go ahead.
And then one just minor change that I noticed under the definitions for personalized reading plan, the parentheses next to it is PLP, whereas everywhere else it's referred to as PRP, so we could make that change.
Technical correction noted, yeah. Thank you. I suspect as we go along, there may be other special enrollment circumstances that we haven't contemplated, and that's something we can kind of evaluate as we go.
And I would anticipate, I know the first time we talked about this, we had shared that there would be updates, as things progress. So I anticipate bringing this back next year, as we learn more, as we start to work through the reading plans a little bit more, start to understand how our students are performing with our assessments and screeners, with the science-based literacy instruction. So we'll bring this back, in the future before it even comes into effect, just based on what we continue to learn.
And Mr. Zenobia, yeah, go ahead.
Well, and to that point, looking at the framework that's been put in place as far as the policy is concerned, I know all this is being worked on by our staff, obviously. But now that we have to kind of track this going forward, and we have several years to do so, I mean, I would certainly like to see an update of how this is kind of being implemented, at least with the data that we're getting, right? I know you've all thought of this, so I'm just saying it formally,
We're-
I guess.
We planted the question,
Yeah, no, I mean, it's
We're-
kind of obvious, but,
We're smiling because in the reading update tonight, you'll see a little bit of the information.
yeah.
And we've been working on, we put together, Jamie Hensel, because I went to her and said, we have to document this and have a process to help people. So we put together guidelines for school to help you go through the stages of retention or promotion on what all would need to happen throughout the year to help guide.
Okay. Go ahead.
What I was going to say before you asked your question was actually in response to the question you hadn't asked. And that is that because this is a 5,000 level policy, so this is the policy set that applies to students and graduation requirements and things like that. I actually thought about your comment, like, as a board, we can put to policy, or at least to an administrative expectation, that we have regular updates and what the frequency and the content of those updates look like. I just didn't think it made sense in this policy since it's student applicable and not operations. But yeah, I think that's data that we're going to want to be tracking in terms of the number of reading plans, where people are at. The other thing I just want to point out to this, because I think it's worth noting, and I think we should make sure that the full board understands this as well, is that the definition of at-risk, and Mrs. Genderman and I spent a good amount of time making sure that we were applying and understanding this appropriately. These are students who are identified as testing in the lower quartiles, so up to 25th percentile. So what that means is we may get to third grade standardized testing and have students at the 40th percentile who are not testing at grade level on the forward exam or the state summative assessment, who aren't on a reading plan because they weren't identified as being in the lower quartile. Some of the other states that applied some of this work picked a different threshold. Was the 5th percentile or was the 15th percentile? So this is intended to be looking at those students that are at the greatest risk for having a bigger gap. I think the thinking there, and I'd love to hear Mr. Brooks' perspective on that, but I think the thinking there is that the closer you are to grade level, the easier it is to close that gap as the students get older. But this is really, these reading plans will be focused on the students that are in that bottom quartile. So, and I know we also, and Ms. Genderman can talk about that too, but we do have plans and interventions for students who are outside of that bottom quartile as well. But, Eric?
Yeah, I think that's a fair explanation, right? The focus of the legislation and the reason why it was, it's been a work in progress for a number of years, and we were finally able to get it passed last session, was we're really missing a lot of kids who are, we don't realize that they have some sort of reading disability or reading deficiency until they get into those grades, like middle school, high school, and then by then, it's too late. I mean, there's a number of studies on all the links and brain development that come with third grade literacy acquisition, but essentially you're going from learning to read to reading to learn by the time you go to fourth grade. So you're no longer learning the basics of how to read. Now you have to actually read the content, and then the majority of your coursework, your classwork, is going to be based on how do you interpret this? Are you reading the instructions of a science question and being able to understand what it's asking you? And typically, if you're not at grade level in reading by the time you're leaving third grade, you're going to struggle with all those other things, and it bleeds into other subjects. And there's all the information on that. And you're exactly right. There's still going to be supports for those students. Anytime you have to pick a cutoff point, there's always going to be some student that's right on that line that's getting left out, so to speak. But that doesn't prohibit supports for that student either. It's just, the requirement is that we focus on these, lower quartile students because they're the ones who were often missing. I mean, during the process of this legislation, spoke with a lot of parents who have students with dyslexia. Well, they didn't find out that their kid had dyslexia until they're in 7th, 8th grade, and they spent thousands and thousands of dollars on reading tutors because the school district just said, well, just read to them more, not realizing that they actually had a learning disability that was causing them to have difficulties reading. So, the goal is to be able to identify those students as early as possible so we can get them those supports and, utilize our reading plans to get them caught up to speed, because the earlier that you're able to catch them and get them up to speed, the easier it is to actually get back up there. Typically, once we wait until they're, 5th grade or middle school or beyond, it's a lot more challenging and a lot more expensive for families.
Mrs. Koenig.
Thank you. I just had a question. Thank you so much. This is an incredible amount of work. I so appreciate what you guys have been doing. I'm just curious, if there's a parent that maybe their child is in 1st grade, maybe in 2nd, it's very clear that they're struggling, and the parent feels that they maybe retaining at an earlier age may be better. Is there any option for a parent to have a conversation with, school teachers, everyone involved in that child's learning, to possibly make a recommendation that maybe the student would be held back in 2nd grade? If it was a significant, gap that the parent feels, well, I'd rather have them held back at 2nd grade or maybe 1st grade if they're really struggling. Is that ever a conversation a parent could have and make
Yeah,
that decision?
That happens, can happen now. It can happen in the future. I actually just had 2 meetings this week where people have gone through the process, and I just made the final approval of retention for students who are at much, much lower grade than 3rd. So it does happen. Does it happen often? No, I don't think we would want it to happen often, right? Because we are hoping that we are able to intervene. We know that we have a lot more students who we need to close more gaps for, but that can happen at any time now. It does, and in the future, it doesn't just have to be at 3rd grade or at the 5th grade transition or the 8th grade transition.
Mr. Brooks.
So one question that I thought of, so you'd mentioned that, part of this is how they perform on the summative assessment, the forward exam, and you mentioned this year we were actually able to get our data in time during the school year so that it makes that decision easier. What happens if in the future, it goes back to being delayed? How does that affect the evaluation process?
It would just delay being able to tell those parents if they are off the plan or not, but we would be meeting with parents all along the way. And we'd have a final meeting and say we're waiting on, do we think it's just this one last piece of needing that one piece of data? But we're not just going to be looking at one piece of data for these students. It's multiple pieces, and the forward happens to be one of those.
Because when have we typically gotten the forward exam results back?
Usually in July.
Okay.
Typically in July, and then looking at the individual student results, obviously takes time to look at who's on a reading plan and that sort of thing. So I think we would, if the timeline of the assessments would change, we, like everything else, would have to be flexible, and we'd just work with parents as much as possible and, do our best with that.
Anything else? Mrs. Kozlowski.
I would motion to approve new board policy 5411, 3rd grade promotion and retention literacy as presented.
Second.
Thank you. Anything else? All right, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, passes 5-0. Thank you, everybody. Continuing on the theme of literacy, I'm going to hand it back over to Mrs. Gunnerman and team for an update on our Year 1 literacy curriculum implementation.
We'll continue with literacy. We have a lot of really good things happening. And so Melissa Yao and Emily Freeman, who is our literacy coordinator, will walk us through some really good information, including some data for you that's hot off the press.
All right. So we are here to give you an update on our first year of implementation with Benchmark, Advance, and Adelante, as well as our first year of implementation with Act 20. So as you know, last year you approved our adoption of Benchmark, Advance, and Adelante, and after our review process, we found it to be a really strong match for the 9 areas of early literacy-based instruction as defined by Act 20, as well as feedback from teachers said that it had all of the pieces that we were looking for with that science-based literacy instruction. This year, we have been really impressed by the K-5 alignment, both in routines and structures, and also the knowledge, the literacy knowledge, as well as the content knowledge. The alignment from year to year is really exciting, even unit to unit. So teachers are starting to see that spiral of how things come back and build upon each other within the year. And I've heard from numerous teachers that they're so excited to see next year what kids already come in with and how that's going to continue to grow, both with just understanding the routine for blending words to the literacy content standards, but also the content knowledge that has really been built along the way. So the training that we have had this year started in July, where we offered training with consultants from Benchmark in Advance and Adelante. And the majority of our teachers came in July and were really excited to get an early start on learning about those resources. We also offered that same session at Summer Institute. And then at Summer Institute, we also trained all of our teachers in the AimsWeb Plus screening, because that would be a new screening tool for us, and we chose to use it right away in the fall. So we provided teachers with training in all their materials, as well as the subtests that they would be administering, and the reason behind each of those subtests, what they measured, what it would tell them. Another big lift in training this year has been everything with Act 20, keeping teachers and stakeholders informed on all of the pieces, as well as our district team providing training specifically to principals, literacy coaches, the school psychologists, and interventionists, who were really that close team that provided all the diagnostic testing. So we had to train them in those processes as well as those assessments, and then the steps of creating those personal reading plans, and then also providing teachers with training in how to understand the personal reading plan, all of the pieces to be able to speak to that to parents, as well as implement those reading plans in their classrooms. To support the launch of our first year with our Benchmark resource, we wanted to have common learning across all of our buildings. The majority of PD happens in buildings weekly, and we wanted them to have some common experiences. We also knew with a brand new curricular resource, we had to lean heavily into what was all there for teachers, how do you use it? We also wanted to get a head start on introducing the science-aligned practices and connecting those to Benchmark. So they would have sort of an understanding of why some of our practices were shifting or why things were set up the way that they are set up in Benchmark. So you can see on that list the focus that we had each month, and those PDs all focused on, here's a little bit of the theory behind that science-aligned practice, here's what it looks like in Benchmark, and then here's some time to plan what that will look like in your upcoming week of teaching. And then in February was when we launched at Winter Institute the Cox Campus modules, which is the teacher training that will meet the Act 20 requirement. And 3 times a month, coaches also met with grade level teams to do unit deep dives to understand, here's the standards, this is what kids are expected to learn in this unit, and here's what my instruction could look like to bring that to life. that Act 20 teacher training, we chose to go with Cox Campus to provide that training. So like I said, we launched that in February at Winter Institute, and you can see that timeline on the left-hand side, how we've scoped out the way that they're going to complete those modules. They have been using professional development time in the months of March, April, and May to complete more of the modules. Teachers will complete some of those over the summer, as well as at Summer Institute, and then into the beginning of next year, with our goal being that in February at Winter Institute, teachers take that final assessment. It also is important to us that teachers get more support than just taking the module, but that they also have support in thinking about, what does this mean in my classroom? What does this look like? And so for each module, it started out, we called it a one-pager, but as you can see, they turned into 4-pagers for each module, where we highlighted the most key learning from that module, as well as connections to the benchmark materials. Where does this show up in your lessons that you're teaching every day? And the Cox Campus modules have a ton of resources, so we put specific links, the ones we really wanted to draw people's attention to and bring them back to. So they get that, and then we also have professional development time woven in between their time to take modules to really help them have time to discuss their learning and apply it, to say, this is what it could look like in my classroom. And then we also wanted to just share some feedback with you. As you can see, people have been really appreciative of a resource that helps them plan that explicit universal instruction. It helps people free up their cognitive energy to really respond to the student need in front of them, while still being sure that they are providing that grade level universal instruction to their class. Teachers have been really impressed by the background knowledge kids are already building, as well as the vocabulary that they are taking on. We have lots of stories of teachers who have found kids outside at recess doing things like snaring animals, not real animals, but using their vocabulary word, and they had a piece of string. These kindergartners were building snares outside. So really seeing that transfer outside of just that reading class. And taking on that vocabulary, as well as that alignment to science and social studies. So kids are really seeing that bigger picture, building that background knowledge, which really impacts their comprehension.
And so last month, I was getting a little bit excited and wanted to keep going to get my computer to share some data, but we waited till now. So on this slide, you will see two views of the data. In the bar graph on the left-hand side, it will tell you the number of students who are requiring a reading plan, and then the schools across the bottom. So yellow is how many students we had at the beginning of the year, the blue is middle of the year, and the green is at the end of the year. Once again, the state determined on the Ames Web Plus assessment, in that universal screener, what assessment flags the student for that area. And then in the table on the right-hand side, that's where we have broken it down for you about how many students we have across our 12 elementary brick and mortar buildings in each grade level. Then in yellow, you can see how many students required a plan, what percentage that is. In blue, that's how many students in the middle of the year, and then at the end of the year. So if you look, this is all of our students in mono and dual combined. So if you look at every grade level, first, second, third, and all of our students total, we did decrease in each area. We did go up in kindergarten. Some of those pieces we have looked into. It was in the area of dual language in kindergarten, and part of that is some of the norms in kindergarten in the fall are extremely low and do a large increase. So we think it was a little lopsided from what the norms were at the beginning. As you know, in statistics, usually every 5 years, norms are re-normed. That will be happening this year. Next year, we'll have new norms for Ames Web. It was scheduled to happen during COVID, and so they've waited to make sure that there's a number of years that weren't just in those first few years of recovery. So then we have a few places that we want to celebrate. So looking at Hatfield, Lowell, Prairie, Rose Glen, and Summit View, those 5 schools all had significant decreases of students from the fall to the spring of who needed reading plans. So really excited about that. Hatfield dropped 20 students overall, Rose Glen 22, Prairie 19, and so just had some great work there. And we've been doing a lot of talking and collaborating together about what can you really put your finger on that is happening in the classroom, happening in interventions, so that we can make sure that we are multiplying those practices that are making the difference for our students. We also wanted to point out, we've been talking a lot tonight about our 3rd graders. So on the left-hand side, you can see we started off with 645 3rd graders in the district. We had 192 students in the fall who needed reading plans, and at the end of the year, we had 173. So we did decrease it by 19 students overall. Is that where we want to be? No, when you think about, we were just talking about retention promotion policy, that's a lot of students. So we hope that each year we will be multiplying the number of students who are not needing reading plans, so that when it comes that time for that promotion policy, that we don't have that many. But the real reason why we want that is not just promotion or retention, it's because we want students to be reading at grade level, not just in 3rd grade, but earlier than that. On the table on the right-hand side, we have some celebrations from our K2 monolingual, and you can see there the decreases from the beginning of the year to the end of the year, especially in our 1st grade. So we had a large number of students in 1st grade requiring reading plans, to a large decrease there come winter and spring. There was a total of 46 students in 1st grade who started out the year needing reading plans and then were able to not require them based on those screeners. Another important piece is family communication, and one of the things that we really liked about Benchmark program is that they provided some of these resources to help us. So before each unit, every unit is 3 weeks long. There is a family letter that goes home that talks about what are they going to be learning through content and the skills that are going to be happening. Then each student at each grade level has a mini workbook, textbook, that there are stories that they read, and then there's also phonics practice, some grammar practice throughout those that they use and engage and write, and they're annotating text even in kindergarten already. But then that workbook goes home at the end of that 3-week unit, and so the parents get to see what were the students doing in class. And the back page is additional practice for parents to be working with their students at home on. So it gives parents ideas of what to be doing to help reiterate those practices and help engage with that. We also have had multiple opportunities. We put together presentations that have been delivered at our Superintendent Advisory Council, the board meetings, if you have also participated before, at our District Curriculum Council meeting, at our Title I parent meetings, and then in each of the buildings through their either PTO or other parent events have shared these presentations with families who do come. We also have a lot of parent communication that is going out about the universal screeners and how students did on those universal screeners, and the personal reading plans when they go on the plan or get off of the plan. There's communication on all those points as well. And with that, we have our next step. So next year, as Emily went over, we will be completing our Cox campus. So by February, within a year, all of our teachers will be trained. We have a plan too with any new teachers who come into the district about how we will be onboarding them and catching them up for what our teachers have already done so that they will be ready to take the test in February. As a celebration, this past February, all of our principals were certified, so they did months of training together. It was wonderful, very collaborative. They've learned a lot, increased their instructional leadership, and we will continue to learn with them.
And our coaches just all passed their Cox campus test
Yes.
on Friday as well.
Our literacy coaches are trained in Keys to Literacy and Cox Campus, so we wanted to make sure that our, those individuals who are really making strong decisions are highly trained as well. And then we will continue to deepen our understanding of benchmark through year 2 implementation. We're going to be utilizing the data to really plan responsibly to our students. And we're going to be strengthening our strategic small group in universal and across our tiers of support at Tier 2 and Tier 3. Questions?
Go ahead.
This was a fabulous update. I mean, this is the highlight of what it is that you all do, and it shows up. It just makes me really proud, and you know, a couple of the highlights that I love is just the unison of the teachers being able to collaborate with each other on common lessons plans and common foundation, and being able to leverage each other with what works and what doesn't. I love the tangible impact that the students get home. You hear a lot of stuff that about just the iPad, and when you start to see that the look and hard things, and I will say as a parent, I don't think that age matters, but when you go home and you ask, you know, they come home, what did you learn today? I don't know, nothing, it was fine. But to be able to give them something that they can relate to and engage with their child to bring it all together, I think is really amazing. I'm really excited to see where year 2 goes, and I hear that it gets better each year, so there's hope for all, right, that this is just going to get better, but this was really great.
Mrs. Koenig.
Thank you. I just want to echo to what Ms. Kozlowski said. And this is amazing. I am so excited to see this get off to such a great start, and I just know it's going to blossom and continue to be fantastic. I'm looking at all the middle school administrators back there, like, you guys have no idea in a few years how you're also going to benefit from this. It's going to be fantastic. I was just wondering, when it came to the family communication, have you had any great feedback? What are the parents thinking about this piece that comes home, and that they can kind of feel like they know what their kids are learning, they can have conversations? Have you gotten the same kind of feedback like you did from the teachers?
Yeah, so one of the opportunities I had is leading our Title I family nights. And so we went through Act 20, we went through presentation about understanding our new resource. And, you know, they were all able to say, yeah, we're seeing, you know, these things coming home, and we're able to use them. Our kids are coming home, they're able to not just say, what did you learn? I don't know, nothing. You know, they're really able to express. We've heard parents even talk about just how, wow, what their students are able to do when they're coming to a word that they don't know, and how they're able to attack it, and how, you know, they're talking about, you know, how they can break big words apart into syllables, and it's just like, they're like, whoa, you know, it's really, really cool, so.
And my oldest daughter is in kindergarten, so she brings these home, and she is super excited to read to me. And it's nice to even see her when she reads it to my husband, because, right, I have literacy training, he doesn't. But I feel like it sets him up to be successful as well in talking to her with just the things that he's able to read right there, or the games that are in there to play. So as a parent, that's a huge win.
That's awesome. Well, thank you. This is so awesome and exciting, and thank you for all your hard work, and our staff is amazing, so thank you.
Mr. Brooks.
Thanks. Yeah, I will echo what Mrs. Kozlowski and Mrs. Koenig said. I think it's really important to understand all this data in the full context. I can attest to the vocabulary piece. When we were first working on this bill, we had an opportunity to tour New Berlin and see some of this in action in some first grade and kindergarten classrooms, and there was a word wall in their kindergarten classroom, and I had to literally ask the teacher, I'm like, am I in the right class? Like, because it was vocabulary that you would expect out of a fourth or fifth grade classroom, that kids are able to not just be able to decode, but actually understand what it means and sound it out, and it's great. I think it's important when we look at the full context of all the kids who are getting personalized learning plans, because it's easy to look at that number and just be like, wow, that's a lot. And we always knew that the first year was going to be the year where that's going to happen, because it's the first year that we're actually implementing this program. I encourage people who look at this data, don't just look at it as, wow, this is how many kids are behind. Think of it as, this is how many kids that would have slipped through the cracks if we weren't actually screening, and now we're able to get those kids the help that they need, whereas in the past they might not have gotten it. So I think it's important to look at it in that mindset as well, because we're helping get these students services and supports that they otherwise might not have gotten. So thank you all again for all the work you do on this.
Anything else? I think it's just reassuring that, when we chose this curriculum, piece of curriculum, it was deliberate based on significant evaluation and recommendations, and not necessarily financial benefit. And we looked at where the need was, and it looks like the impact, at least in the first year of implementation, has been positive. So that's very reassuring, exciting about what's to come.
And I can't leave this presentation without thanking our teachers. They have been amazing. We're going to talk about math in just a minute. So in 2 years, they've had a brand new math curriculum and a brand new reading curriculum, and they are showing up for students, digging in, coming with asset-based mindsets and really putting themselves in the learner seats. And I just can't say enough about the educators that we have in the school district of Waukesha. So they deserve all the credit.
Yep, I see lots of heads nodding, so we agree. All right, thank you. Appreciate it. All right, Mrs. Yao is going to stay. We're moving into elementary math year 2 implementation update.
All right, I've got a wonderful group here with me. So Rose Palmer, who is our math coordinator. I have Rachel Kazicki, who is our interventionist guru and partner with our Universal, and then, of course, with special ed with my counterpart, Hadassah Robinson, who's director of elementary special education.
So 2 years ago, we were here getting iReady approved. And if you recall, we shared with you some of the things that iReady offered, and it's really come into life this year. And you can see there the structure of a lesson. They have the Explore days, they have Develop and Refine. Every day they're going through the Try, Discuss, Connect. So every day students are trying the math, then they discuss it, and then they connect it to real-world problems or to new problems. And through that process, the kids have gotten so strong this year. It was teachers saying the kids knew what to expect coming in, because this is the same process no matter if they're in kindergarten all the way up to 5th grade. And so that has proven to be very helpful for our students to jump right in and know what to expect when math class comes. Along with that, with the program, they offer the personalized path and the fluency practice. So there is a digital component. The My Path is based on their diagnostic assessment. So if they, depending on how they do on the diagnostic, that's wherever their lowest area of need is, that's where the diagnostic will talk to the My Path. My Path will start them in those lessons in particular. So very personalized, and it adjusts as students grow. Fluency Flight is something we added in February, and we're excited about it because it's all about the math facts. And they practice their math facts. They have the adding, subtracting, multiplying, and dividing, just like we would expect. But as you can see on this, they really go through, there's 4 different stages that students go through. First, learning it conceptually, getting more and more practice with it until they have it mastered, and then they keep circulating back to them as time goes on. It's a limited amount of time. The students can only pass 2 lessons a day. The first activity that they do is one that they get to choose, and then the second one is that iReady says, this is the fluency you need to work on. So it gives voice and choice, but then also hits upon the strategies or the facts that the students really need to work on. And then finally, there's a learning games component also, that if students are on My Path in Fluency Flight, and we only say about 45 to 50 minutes a week on all of the digital components. So while I say we have that digital component, it's not that we're living in the digital component. It's to enhance the universal instruction that our teachers are doing. And so the learning games are just another option. And the learning games adjust also to the level of students. So while I say it's a learning game and we may have everybody playing the pizza game because they all seem to like that pizza game, it all varies depending upon what level or what grade you're in.
And of course, all this couldn't happen without making sure that we are all doing learning together. So we have partnered with iReady. So last year, they came in at Summer Institute and at Winter Institute and held sessions with all of us by each grade level and doing learning with them. And then they came in and each building had a rep come in and do learning walks with them. And then there was time that then someone else would go into the classroom and teach for a minute so the teacher could come out and talk with the rep about what they saw. So being able to hear those celebrations of what they saw going well and offer some next steps. We mirrored that again this year with iReady, where they came in Summer Institute and Winter Institute, and then we did learning walks a little bit earlier this year. Last year we did it in the spring because we were new in our implementation. This year we did it in November because we really wanted that feedback earlier, especially as we were focusing on our student discourse this year in math, and so we could really work on that. We had the past 2 years Common Building PD, so last year we really focused on that structure of the explore, develop, and refine days and what that meant, and then digging into each day of what does that mean for the try, the discuss, and the connect components of that. This year, we really dug into the assessments and the rubrics that we have on how to provide feedback to students. We looked at our math tools. We looked at how you can sequence and select which students' work you want to show the varying ways that you can do it and how it might increase in rigor if you do it different ways. We also looked then at different ways that we can help getting our students to talk more about math. We just don't want them talking in class. We want them to be talking about math, asking other questions, building upon other students' ideas, clarifying, challenging each other in their thinking about what might be the most efficient way to solve a problem.
And with the new curriculum, we also have an outline of our experience within year 1 and year 2. And so the biggest feedback from special education teachers as we were onboarding in year 1 is how does this resource support students in special education? We have multiple different modes of models of instruction for special education. And so we thought in order to lead the work, we had to do the work. And so Rachel and I teamed up and we went and asked Hawthorne if they would love us to come in and teach for a week. And it was exciting because I was my special education teacher self and Rachel was the teacher, and we co-planned with the special education teacher and the regular education teacher for the week, and really wanting to dive in on knowing the experience of the teachers as they're teaching students with this new curriculum, and then how would that then support special education. And so we started that, and out of that, we then developed what does this resource have to offer for students in special education. And then we started our voyage. And so I'm going to kind of lean into Rachel for our voyage.
So Hadassah and I got to go to every school together. We met with every PLC team to talk about our experiences at the classroom at Hawthorne and talk about what the implications were and what the outcomes were and how we saw specially designed instruction fitting into iReady and how we saw them collaborating with their classroom teacher counterparts as to how to best serve the needs of their students. So we did that all in year one. In addition to that, our special education teachers were in the PD that was the common building PD that these ladies talked about. Our special education teachers were a part of that as well. This current year, we took a little bit different turn, and instead of having all the teachers together in the same PD, we had common building PD for our classroom teachers, and then Hadassah and I took that and we mirrored that, but we took the parts that were most applicable to our special education teachers, brought that to their attention, and then filled kind of the remaining time with really intentionality around how to use math tools to increase students' conceptual understanding and how to increase their planning for their specially designed instructional time.
And I'm sorry, I just wanted to add one thing. From year one into year two, we onboarded all of the new teachers in special education of the learning that happened in year one, so that we could then assure that everyone was coming in calibrated with the same understanding, so that we could start year two, any special education, new special education teacher into our system had that learning and understanding during that new teacher institute time.
So here comes the exciting part, which is the data. When you look at the left-hand column, or the left-hand side, you will see right now where we are at the end of the 24-25, the spring diagnostic we just did. This quadrant chart is something that iReady does for us that we get to see. And what it does, it starts off at the beginning of the year, and they compare the growth of students from the beginning of the year to the end of the year. And this is all based on the median growth, which is median is the middle child, you know, take out your highs and lows and find that middle student. And in the bottom picture or graph, you can see where we were last year. We had some of our grade levels that were right below the 50th quadrant, was kind of in that low performance but high growth. And this year, all of our grade levels, special education and our regular education students, all of the grade levels are now in high performance, high growth. And that is exciting and significant. We're seeing it across the board. We're seeing, as we're talking about what's happening for middle school next year, what are we sending to middle school? It's just phenomenal, exciting. The graph that's on the right-hand side is just relative placements, just looking at spring of last year to the spring of this year. So obviously different cohorts in kindergarten, but you can see even within the differences, our students are improving every single, from the spring of last year, the spring of this year, our kindergarten has achieved more, or our first grade. And I think what that speaks to is that our students are coming in with more knowledge so that our teachers are being able to take them further in their grade level content, which is what we want to see happening. We're growing more proficient and we're reducing that number of students who are 2 or 3 or more grades below. And that, when we meet with iReady, they were saying this incremental change is what we really want to see, is because it's slow and steady. And that's exactly what our data is showing us.
Another celebration that we had is, of course, we want every student every year to be making at least a year's growth. And in iReady, they have what's called stretch growth. And we were recognized this year by iReady for 2 of our schools. You get recognized if you have 55% of your students or more hit their stretch growth. So Prairie and Rose Glen last school year hit their stretch growth goal. So just a big celebration for those two schools.
Here's our data for special education. So on this bar graph, what you're seeing is the total number of students who are in special education in our elementary buildings that are below grade level or not assessed. So from last year to this year, one thing that you can see overall is that the number of students who are below grade level is shrinking, which is exactly what we want to see happen. And then I wanted to cross-check to make sure that that wasn't a fluke because our enrollment is dropping, because I'm just looking at numbers. So that bar on the left-hand side last year, that was 12.1% of our whole school or our whole elementary population. And this year, that's only 11.4% of our student population. So that helps us validate that fact that we are seeing fewer students in special education that are below grade level on their math assessment at the end of the year. This bar graph shows us the median student, so that, again, that middle student, how much they grew towards their typical growth, what would be like a year's growth. So if anybody hits that 100 line on the graph, that means that they have made their growth target for that year. So that's, again, we're looking at the middle student. So we're showing you two different schools, but the blue column is the whole school. Red is all of our students at those schools without IEPs. Yellow is every student with an IEP. And then green is us taking out just the students who have math goals, because a student might have an IEP for speech and language or behavior or literacy, but not necessarily receive math services. So green is just that math area.
And one piece that we really wanted to highlight is all of our professional learning that we did that was targeted for special education school teams at all 12 elementary schools is really focused this year in conjunction with our amazing math coaches is on instructional math practices. And what does that instruction look like for math? And so that's why we really wanted to highlight students with math IEP goals, because their specialized instruction is in math. And so also the reason is that Hadfield, their growth has continued. So they had growth last year, and so they're maintaining and still exceeding their growth. And Summit View had increased their growth by over half. And so their students with math IEP goals doubled for their growth.
Question, yeah.
I just want to make sure I follow the chart. So the blue is whole school.
So the middle,
I'm trying to understand why the green is higher than the whole.
so the middles, when you line up all of Hadfield's students and you select the kid who's in the middle, that student grew more than a year's growth. They surpassed that 100%. But if you were to take only the students who received math support from special education teachers, the middle student in that group
Grew more.
than that middle student from the
Got
high
it.
school.
Got it. That's
And
excellent.
our students that are in special education would be the students who are getting instruction in the regular ed and then a second time during the day. So that's what's also, that shows us that that intervention or their specially designed instruction is really having an impact. Every year, I also ask teachers for feedback because I think teachers are the most important people out there that do the work. And this really validates the scores we're seeing, what I hear when I'm out in buildings. And I asked two questions specifically. There were some rating scales, Likert scales, 1 to 5 and all that. But I asked them, what is your student success? What do you think is the biggest student success for the year? What is your teacher success for the year? And so these are some of the comments that came back from teachers. I've seen a lot of growth in confidence. They're excited for math. They work hard. It shows in what they're doing. They talk about how math is their favorite part of the day. Yes, So that was a fourth grade teacher. In the same sense, I've had special education teachers who commented that kids are more excited and again showing that they're confident in trying, not as frustrated. I think the third comment about 7 students started this school year 3 or more grade levels below, and now there's only 2 And this is at first grade. So if we can get that at first grade, that just sets us up for success as we go along. And then because we focused on discourse this year, there were many comments. I could have picked several comments, but I just picked one out from a third grade teacher that discourse has improved. Students are excited to share and explain their strategies, to learn from each other, to see what other students have done, and that it's challenging kids at the high levels, but also at our middle and our students who might be struggling because they're hearing about something else. As far as family communication, you heard Emily talk about with literacy, we have lots of communication in math, whether it's the beginning of the year newsletter we send out, or each lesson, parents get another letter home. Sometimes it's almost too much communication probably for some parents, because you're going to be getting a letter at least once a week. In some of our shorter lessons, it might be twice a week. But again, it always gives something for parents to know what we're doing and what they could do at home. And then because last year we had, at the end of the year, we had worked on our assessments, we made a cover page that goes home with every end of unit assessment so parents can see how our students doing on the standards and specifically the scores that go with it. And then finally, the iReady diagnostic reports go home with our district cover letter.
So next year, we're going to continue to deepen our knowledge and how we can use iReady and the evidence of student thinking to really adjust to each student's needs. We're going to be utilizing that data from formative and summative assessments as we meet with teachers in our team meeting, PLCs. And then we are beginning the work of defining those essential standards, because we know we're going to teach all the standards, but we really want to know which standards do we want to make sure that kids are leaving each grade level mastered in.
And next steps for special education is we're going to continue to develop and really use a college and career ready IEP process in developing our math goals, utilizing the essential math standards, and refining our progress monitoring and really using that data, diagnostic data, to determine then student outcomes and making sure that students are continuously growing in math, especially those with math IEP goals.
And then finally, we're going to be talking with our teams and teachers about utilizing the intervention materials that we do have to be able to not only teach them well, but select the right one for the right student at the right moment based on the data that they have from working with those students.
And what questions do you have for us?
This is great. Thank you. It's a lot. It's exciting to see all of this in practice. It's also exciting that we have this just district-wide, so we can make those comparisons and interventions and get some of that experience. I do have a specific question that's on the iReady data page with the cross-sectional spring-to-spring comparison.
Yep.
Just want to make sure that I'm understanding this graph correctly. So if I look at second graders in the spring of 23-24, are those the third graders in the spring of 24-25? So the left bar, I'm comparing to the right bar of third grade.
You could, but also understand that when iReady is testing, K students were trying to see where they are on K standards.
Got it.
So when you're taking that second grade first column and comparing it to third grade, or second grade first column to third grade second column, it's the same students with move-ins and move-outs, but also the curriculum changes quite a bit from second to third. And so you know, like I was looking at that like, okay, we should be growing each year. But I think the big thing between second and third, there's a big difference in curriculum. K1, 2 kind of get grouped together. 3, 4, 5 gets grouped together because third grade's where we start fractions, multiplication, and division, which are their big learning pieces.
Okay. So I think what we're looking at here, at least with the limited data, obviously we're only a couple years into implementation, is that at least year to year, our students are showing a greater readiness for the grade level material when in the spring assessment. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see the third year in this, because it's cohort
Right.
dependent, sure.
And I know iReady, when they share data with us, they say it's hard to always look at the cohort to be as accurate as you want it to be because you're testing different standards between them. So it's not like the rigor's going up, and like I said, between second and third especially, the content is a drastic change.
Well, and also, I guess as I look at this, our fourth to fifth grade, these students didn't have the benefit of having this
Correct.
curriculum from the beginning. So there's going to be a little bit of a gap there.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Mrs. Kozlowski?
Dr. Piasek took my chart questions, so I'll just, I think this is, again, it's great and exciting to see. And I think one of the pieces that I heard in just your feedback is listening to a stigma that we're starting to see change, which is the children are now embracing the numbers because numbers are great. They're truly fantastic. You can build a whole life on them. But to hear them enjoy that and gain the confidence not to be afraid of that. And I think as we start to see that, that will also show up in the charts as we go through. So year 2, I'll say the same thing. Year 3, like we should be starting to really see our advancement and move forward. So again, there's a lot. I think we're grateful for all of the work and the time that you're dedicating because it shows. And the benefit that we're getting to see with a universal program like this and having the metrics to go with it are showing that our students are thriving, and that is really great.
All right. Well, you have to stay because it's pouring rain outside, so. Thank you very much. I do want to thank, I know we have multiple administrators in the room, and I value their time greatly, so it's getting kind of late. We have 2 kind of bigger topics that we want to get through tonight, so if everybody's still willing, we'll move into the charter school overview. So we're going to welcome our principals from our charters forward. Mrs. Gavin, do you want to kick this off?
Yep, I'll get this started and kick this off as it starts to storm downstairs. I'm relying on Dr. Siebert to be watching the weather just in case we do need to relocate. Yes. So you just give us a sign if we need to relocate. So joining me tonight are our principals of our charter schools. I'll have them introduce themselves as they talk about their school. The purpose of tonight is really just to give an overview. Thanks, Dan. Is to give a high-level overview of our great offerings that we have in the district that just happen to be in charter schools within the system. First, we have Waukesha STEM Academy. We have that for elementary and middle. We have eAchieve Academy for elementary and middle. And then at the high school level, we have Waukesha Academy of Health Professions and then Waukesha Engineering Preparatory Academy. So tonight what I'll do is just give a quick overview of Big Things Charter School and some of the work that we've been doing. And then each principal will share one slide on their school itself and what makes them unique. And then we can talk and discuss about any, further steps. Again, this is meant to be an overview, and we just wanted to highlight the great things that we have beyond our traditional schools. So first and foremost, what I wanted to do is just highlight that each charter school has a contract between the governance board and our school district. These you often see through the F&F committee board meetings. Typically, the contracts are for about 5 years. The contracts itself are a little bit different. I think as we move forward, I would make some recommendations that we look at some of those for consistency. But we do run those through F&F, and each charter contract does look a little bit different. Enrollment for all of the charter schools is open to all district students as well as outside of our school district. So that is an open enrollment opportunity that some families do take advantage of. I also wanted to highlight that while some of these schools are within our own buildings, there is a separate report card for each of these schools. And so that is often something you'll hear us talk about, especially with South. They have South High School, and then they have the 2 academies, and so those are all different report cards and student data. And so sometimes that's great to highlight some of those pieces, but other times we do kind of wish they were together. But we just want to highlight that each school does have its own report card and data. What you'll see in future newsletters that are going to be in the mail real soon is a highlight of our charter schools and what they really all have to offer throughout our district. That's something we've been working on together as a team as part of our efforts. I reference that each charter school has a governance board. Here's a sample of a statement from one of the contracts regarding what a governance board does. So their role is to oversee the success of the school, recommend future considerations, and provide feedback and guidance on school goals, improvement plans, and significant changes in operations. For this charter school, you will see that the agendas for the governance board follow these specific areas. Down below here, you see how, as far as the district, really in working with partnership with Darren, we provide the funding. The staffing allocation comes from Sharon, and the school year calendars are similar to the district. If they are different, that also goes through Sharon as far as approval prior to making that public. New this year, I get the lucky opportunity to work with these guys. So not only as principals, but we started to meet on a regular basis. We meet quarterly and talk everything charter school. And we really first started with governance councils and what they look like. Coming into this year, not every charter school had a governance council. And so that was one of the things we wanted to shore up and make sure we have. And so we took an opportunity to meet and hear about how other people within our system run their governance council meetings, who's on their governance council board. Sometimes, especially for the engineering academy, there's engineers. Health academy, there's people in the health, profession that are guiding some of this work, where some of our other ones are parents. So it's all different based on the charter school, but the highlight really is that we all have governance boards and that we are collaborating. Our other area, it's been slow going, but we've been working on our curriculum articulation, not just for our brick and mortar schools, but sitting down and talking about where are we similar and where are we different for the charter schools. We've done the most of this work with eAchieve and teaching and learning, especially with all of our AP textbook adoptions. Laura Ryan, myself, and Jason and Emily, the AP at eAchieve, sat down and looked at all the resources. And there are some times that we found that we are using the same resource, but maybe paying for it differently. So we're trying to strategize together about how we use our funds together. And then that even leads into not just the resources, but even professional development. So this is definitely a work in progress. Like I said, we focused this year on eAchieve, starting at the high school level, where some of our other schools, like the academies at South, there's not very much different curriculum. The courses that the students take are just different, and that comes through the teaching and learning resources, where other ones, sometimes we're using the similar resources and sometimes not. So this is going to be ongoing work that we'll continue to do. Some of the other pieces that we've talked about as a team is really making more steps for system alignment. This year, STEM elementary and STEM middle school are going to do their strategic planning day together and have some components that they are looking at, some of their tools that they use. For example, the resources that they use for student profiles or something that's very specific to a charter school, having their teams talk through those and just find some efficiencies in alignment when we can. The other piece that, with the help of our newsletter, the team and I have been working on is enhancing our marketing for all of the schools. That's been in our newsletter. You may have seen some Facebook posts recently around some of the charter schools and the mini folds. We started to do those for some of our brick and mortar schools, but then also having them for our charter schools so that people can just hand them out. I know Maria was at district office here a few weeks ago, and she grabbed all of the mini folds so she can just hand them out as she's talking to people. So we're working together on that marketing piece. There's still more work to do, but we feel like we're in a step in the right direction since we are coming together on a regular basis and talking all things charter school. So now I'm going to turn it over to the team. They can introduce themselves and their school, and then they have just a high-level overview about the school, and then we'll just transition through each of the schools, and then open it up for conversation. We won't get into the nitty-gritty, but we're certainly welcome to share more information at other times. So up first, we have STEM.
Good evening. My name is Dan Paczynski. I'm the principal at Waukesha STEM Elementary School.
James Murray, principal at the Waukesha STEM Academy, Saratoga campus.
We're excited to be here to kind of share with you what makes us special and unique at both of our sites. And although we're in two different buildings, we share the same philosophy. And it's exciting to have such a great relationship with the school. It's exciting to get their students at our building and our students at their building. So we'll talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest growth factors we've seen is the combination and the collaboration, where we, under the state, we're a K-8 system, right? That's our charter. We've always sort of coexisted, probably the first 9-10 years. And I think upon Dan coming into the building, it's just been amazing to where we've collaborated, we've grown together. I've known Dan well, but I used to try to recruit Dan every year, well before he became a STEM principal. Just love his work, love his background and his passion. And I knew when Melissa Horn left that Dan was the right fit for that. So it was a beautiful match for us. But I just think the mindset that our kids have at Saratoga fits perfectly with what Dan is preparing those students for at the elementary level. So they don't come as just a fish out of water, and all of a sudden it's like, holy cow, what is this? I've never done a project or STEAM or collaborative work or presentation or things like that. So it's worked out really well.
Yeah, over my time here at STEM, we've really focused, both of us, on figuring out how do we have our kids build a very strong academic foundation. Without the strong academic foundations in literacy, reading and writing, and mathematics, as well as social studies and science, how do we get kids to solve problems that are relevant? We've always been really good at getting kids to collaborate, be really skillful at communicating and presenting their work. And now we want it to get to that next level. And I think we're doing a really good job of trying to figure out how do we bridge the gap between the elementary school and the middle school to get kids prepared. A great example of that is our 5th grade project. We do a mini version of Future Cities, and it all came about from our 5th grade teachers asking the question, how can we better prepare our kids for middle school? And so a few years back, they developed this project. They do a smaller version of the middle school project, and we have a great collaboration between our two facilities. And the kids, just like those words you see on the screen, they're engaged in a really big project. They get to collaborate with teams. They try to be innovative by making their own future cities that looks 100 years in the future. By the way, this is not different or outside of the scope of our elementary programming. It's just an offshoot of our curriculum. It's just in addition to it. So we talk about how to build sustainable ecosystems in 5th grade. Well, guess what the project is about? It's about that. And it's very exciting to see kids do that. And then we get, maybe even some of you get invited to come volunteer and judge our students. And then our winners go to the middle school and present. So those are just one example of what we do a little bit differently and how we get some kids into more project-based learning to expand the curriculum that we use throughout Waukesha.
Yeah, I'd say that second bullet point probably is the most critical mass for our students and our staff in our community. As far as unique educational opportunity, we do have classes, right? We do have math and science and literacy and everything else. But to us, the project-based learning, the collaboration, the things that the students are involved in are sort of like a means to an end, right? We don't, those are all tied to those projects and those experiences and those, the end result really is them learning and the applying of that knowledge, and the math and the writing and the reading and the speaking and the listening and the telling the story truly in a different way. And so I tried to highlight a bit, excuse me, on the right side with the engage, to collaborate, innovate, create, and engage and think would be the other, from the mantra around our logo. But really the bottom two, we've changed up quite a bit, I'd say in the past 5 years, where we focus so heavily on the 5 around our logo. And we really forgot to go public. We always did public things. We always got out. We did competitions. We got our students into the community. We did partnerships. We did collaborative pieces with the campus down the street when it was at Randall and now at Whittier. But going public in the sense of now we're out in the community, which is the bottom right. We're working with the homeless shelter, the women's shelter, the Hebron House. Our gardens are solely based on donating every single scrap of food to the women's shelter, everything. Every flower we sell, the money goes to the shelter, to the Hebron House. The going public piece, we used to host a lot of competitions, and now we're back out on the market. So things like WCTC and MSOE, flying out teams to DC for future cities. We just won Rube Goldberg. I think we took first, third, and fifth place at WCTC for that. So, I mean, we've always done these things, and again, I think it took us 13 years to get to DC for that competition alone for future cities. And I don't want to say we hit the sweet spot, but I think we have students there now that really understand why they're there. And it hasn't changed. The criterion hasn't changed. It's open enrollment to everybody within our district, within our county, within our state, to be quite fair. It's just students really found their niche or their niche of what they really want to do. And it's a competency-based environment. And so I hear the great stories about math and about literacy, and it warms my heart because we're competency-based. We've got kiddos reading anywhere from 4th grade to 12th grade. Students doing math from 4th grade through Calc BC in the past. Like, that's just crazy to me. But you give them the opportunity and you let them soar, and I think it encompasses and it embraces all these things, and that doesn't happen without our friends down the street, so.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
All right, let's move on to EAchieve.
Thanks. My name's Jason Smith. I'm the principal at EAchieve Academy and EAchieve Elementary. Thanks for the opportunity to share a little bit about EAchieve. I've got some talking points there. I have a data point that I want to start with that I think is pretty significant. This is my 10th year at EAchieve. I was the assistant principal for 5 and now 5 years as principal. And when I started, when we would end a school year and start the next school year, we would expect that we would turn over about 50% of our students, meaning we'd have to recruit 50% of our students for the next year. And the data that I heard today was that 85% of our kids have classes and are coming back next year. That's pretty significant, and I'm really excited about that. And I think I can attribute it to one thing, and we just have an amazing staff of teachers. And so while those are talking points about our different synchronous and asynchronous models, the people that we have working at EAchieve are really incredible. And before I came there, I thought that the folks that taught virtually thought that virtual learning was the only way, like we should all be virtual learners. And it took me a year or so at EAchieve to realize that that wasn't the case. Face-to-face schools are doing a wonderful job. We just heard the great stories that are happening all across our district. Virtual learning exists because there's kids that need something different. And it's a real privilege and pleasure to be able to offer that to them and be in a position to support that. And we've had a chance to form partnerships with district folks and other schools in other districts to try to create that. There was some challenges in when I started because we're competing for kids. There's 65 virtual charter schools in Wisconsin, more kids than ever taking virtual classes. And we're still one of the biggest. We have about 950 full-time enrollments across all of our grades. So it's just an honor to be part of the school and to celebrate the good work that our teachers are doing, and really the idea that we hold our teachers and our students that we're accountable to treating everyone with dignity and respect. And I know that the idea of building relationships is kind of a trite thing to say, but we really put time into that because you have to be so overt to do that in a virtual model. And when we've done that, we've seen the dividends. And now we have 85% of our kids coming back. So I'm really excited for the work.
Good evening. Thanks for having me here. Maria D'Amato. I'm the principal at South, and I'm also the principal of the Health and Engineering Academies that are housed within South. Something that I think we talk a lot about with our families and students is the number of opportunities that students are given when they walk through our doors at South High School. And it really is truly the great work that's happening in our system from the elementary school up. So the Health Academy has been around since 2004, well before my time. But when I came into the district as an assistant principal, I was given the opportunity to be the administrator of these academies. I've learned a lot over the years, and am really proud to share these opportunities that we definitely have both continued but also built upon. So in the Health Academy, students are given specially designed, rigorous curriculum using Project Lead the Way in 2 courses every single school year that are in the healthcare profession. In addition to that, they do have some additional graduation requirements that include working with many of our partnerships. That's Pro Healthcare, that's Rogers, there's so many of them, and ensuring that they have some real-life hands-on experiences within the field in which they think they want to study. We talk to the students when they come in as freshmen. The picture on the lower right-hand side is our incoming freshmen for this coming school year about right now you believe you want to be in the healthcare field, and that's wonderful. We want to help you know if that's truly the direction in which you want to move, and what a great opportunity to be able to do that in high school and not wait till you get till college and spend a lot of money doing it. Many students leave. Tonight we just had a showcase. It was fantastic, and they know exactly what area of healthcare or in engineering, they know exactly what area of engineering they're going into and have set them up for success well beyond their peers that sometimes surround them because of this opportunity. In addition to that, students can participate in all of the athletics at South High School. They can participate in all the clubs, and quite frankly, they really are an extension of South High School. As Jen had mentioned before, we do have separate reporting in terms of our school report cards, and so our Health and Engineering Academy are represented separately, which is both wonderful celebration and can sometimes be a frustration as all of our teachers within the Health and Engineering Academies are teaching our students. So just like the Health Academy, our Engineering Academy has specially designed rigorous curriculum using Project Lead the Way in the STEM field. Students take 2 courses every single school year within those, within the area of engineering. They get to choose between aerospace and there's so many options. We have a flight simulator, which is new this year. So a lot of opportunities for our students that they wouldn't be afforded if we didn't have these academies within South High School. So we're really proud of the work. We would love to showcase this work to you in any way, shape, or form. Something else we're really proud of is we've been considered a Project Lead the Way distinguished school for the past 5 years in the Health Academy, past 6 years in our Engineering Academy, so we've been recognized and also are asked to present at national presentations for Project Lead the Way. In addition to that, our Engineering Academy is our #1 school in our district, scoring the highest on their school report card, something we're really proud of. And then our Health Academy is our #3, only 1/10 of a point below West High School, something we're also very, very proud of. So we're both significantly exceeding expectations and exceeding expectations based on school report cards, and that doesn't happen by accident. It's a lot of the work of our teachers, as well as the partnerships that we have with our board, which are engineer and healthcare workers. So any questions, we would love to answer them.
Thank you all very much. Mrs. Kozlowski.
This is great. There's 2 pieces actually that I just want to comment on, and Jason, you'll hear this one again because I've talked to you about this a lot. But #1 is marketing. And I want you guys to think about marketing, because one of the pieces that we hear in the district is that, what are we doing to become a destination district? And the answer is we are a destination district. We are exceptional with our staffing, we are exceptional in our programming, and the items and the focuses that you guys are leading are what is driving that. And it's the marketing and what are we doing to call out all of these things, the community involvement. And it's more than just how do you get outside of Wisconsin, right? It's more than, it's all of these things that we are doing to prepare our students and give them so many different avenues to pursue their dreams, that is why we are great. And so those are my two pieces. I think I'd love to get into more and spend more time on that. I think that at some point, yes. But this is a testament to the great things you're doing. This is great.
Anybody else? Mr. Zenobia?
Yeah, just to echo what Ms. Kozlowski had said. It's amazing job that you all do, and I think we as a board sometimes ask and have these conversations throughout years past of how do we attract more students to all these programs. I think there's room in all of these programs, and maybe so much to the marketing point, but how do we get out there? This was a great way to do it tonight, but there's a lot of opportunity here in the district. We all do a great job. You all do a great job, rather. And how do we get more students attracted to these programs? I think would be something to think about over the next few months over the summer. And how do we do that? And how do we as a board help you do that? So I appreciate the presentation.
I think, sometimes we forget that there's this label of charter, right? Because your programs are such a permanent part of what we do and the educational offerings that we have. I'm impressed how, we kind of had the pop-up virtual schools during the COVID timeframe, everywhere. And I think the consistency and the resiliency of eAchieve has just, survived that and thrived through that, right? Now there's these students that are coming back because they thrive in that environment. I think, so one of the things that Mrs. Gunnerman and Dr. Sieber and I have been talking a lot about is just creating that consistency. And we forget sometimes that we have this contractual relationship between the district board and the governing boards of those charter schools, but then they employ or enlist you all as leaders, principals of that program to execute the educational program, and sometimes that intersects with the standard educational program, and sometimes you do the things that make sense for the philosophy that you have and that you need. So I think it's very complementary to what we do, and I think that relationship is important, that there's that agreement that we think this is important enough that we want to offer it, but we also want to give some room to have your advisory boards kind of guiding how that's going to go and what makes the best sense for you. So I think about that a lot. And I think that all 9 of us who are behind the decisions to renew those contracts every 5 years are really looking to those governing boards and to you as leaders of those schools to execute to the best of your ability. So I appreciate that relationship, and also, that it's a nuanced one, right? The outcomes speak for themselves. Obviously, students who choose your programs are choosing them, with some transportation limitations, or they're choosing because there's schedule advantages or there's flexibility. And so whatever that is, I agree that consistency around how we get visibility to what your students are doing, it just looks a little different, right? Because we have the high school students coming in. We engage differently at the middle and elementary, but more advanced notice of some of your activities would be greatly appreciated so that we can plan accordingly. A lot of times we find out about things like, oh, today at 1 o'clock we're having this big thing. It's like, oh, we really want to go. So more advanced notice would be great. And I know Mrs. Gunnerman is willing, and Mary Jo as well, to help us get a little bit more organized around those things. Because I think you'll find most of the time when you ask us, we'll do it if we can put it on the calendar. So we would love to have more of those opportunities. And just grateful that you lead the way that you do. And again, there's just so many unique things about each one of these programs that I can't say enough about, and I wish we had more time. But we also want to get into more of a rhythm of having the review of, because you're all generating annual outcomes and reports and report cards and all those things that we need an opportunity to sit with you
And that's something we'll talk about more as we'll continue with our quarterly meetings, and the work in between those. I think those have been beneficial, but that's one thing we'll talk about moving forward is just continued alignment and, regular updates. All right.
Very good.
Thank you guys for being here.
Thank you so much.
I know the rain is coming, and as our next group transitions up, I just want to thank everyone for who's here. Tonight, I know we're going a little bit longer, but there's lots of good celebrations at the end of the year.
And we get a break in June, so we're doing
And
two meetings
yes.
in one.
And I would also say that being Waukesha as big as we are, we often take students who are taking classes to get their curriculum director license. And so over the last several board meetings, we've had extra people in the audience who are learning from what they're witnessing here, and then our directors partner with them as far as their next steps. But sometimes they come to our board meetings and they'll be working with us throughout the summer. So that's just another opportunity that we have. So adds to the number of people here tonight. So, all right. So
I feel like we did this strategically so we could talk about the start time for middle school when we end a meeting at 10 p.m.
All right, so let's transition and talk about the middle school schedule. So Ken's going to bring up the slide deck, and really, I'll kick us off by really just getting us grounded on, since we've been here, there's been continued work and conversation since we've all been together. And so what we wanted to do was to go and visit the current schedule, just high-level overview of what was shared last time, as well as the additional schedules brought forward, and giving a little bit more detail. And then the team is going to also share with you the work they've been doing with their group as well as their schools. And they've been instrumental in working with that great team of educators that they've had some really robust conversations that have gotten us thus far. So I'm going to kick it over to Dee, but we'll start by going over the current schedule and then getting into those two other schedules and giving a little bit more detail.
Good evening, everyone. Nice to see you all. I know it's a little bit late, but we'll try to be really concise with you. It's really a pleasure to be back here today to follow the conversations that we've had around elementary teaching and learning and welcome those students into middle school. As you know, last month we brought two middle school schedules to you to take a look at and get familiar with. Those two schedules are intending to help us and support us to achieve the following goals: a guaranteed and viable curriculum with sufficient instructional time to be able to deliver on the resources and the promise of those resources. The second is the opportunity for students to receive additional supports and enrichment opportunities that go beyond the universal curriculum. And the final one is that we'd like to be able to offer our electives on an A-day, B-day alternating experience to ensure that students have access to all the different experiences that we offer. To get started, we're going to revisit just the traditional day that we have in place right now. Our current schedule offers literacy blocks that are 86 minutes long in 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. There are math blocks in 6th and 7th grade, which are also 86 minutes long. And then the remaining periods of the day are 43 minutes, in which we also provide passing time. You'll notice that we provide science and social studies every single day for 43 minutes, as well as mathematics in the 8th grade for 43 minutes, and then there are the elective periods. In 6th and 7th grade, there are two consistent elective periods, and in the 8th grade, there are currently 3 elective periods. So we will go through the proposals that we brought to your attention last month. We brought to you the concept of the 6-period day, as well as the modified block. And I'm going to invite my colleagues to take the majority of the conversation tonight around what we've done since then. But both schedules feature daily core subject area instruction and that homeroom time to provide additional supports and enrichment. Both will feature electives, which are offered over 2 periods every other day. And progressing through the slides, we'll detail both a daily view of what a student's experience could look like, as well as a weekly view and perspective. So I'd like to first invite Laura to get us started, and we'll continue through tonight's conversation.
Sounds good. Thanks, Dee. So we start with last month, we brought you a 6-period schedule, which offers core classes daily, electives every other day, and a daily homeroom or advisory period. Advisory has been a schedule guarantee since 2023, and it is used flexibly to deliver instruction in career and academic planning, social emotional learning, and AVID strategies. The shift in advisory to homeroom aligns our work 612 to ensure that all students also have access to the proposed additional time and support that they need to meet grade level proficiency and excel beyond the grade level. These schedules are models, so we'll need to be flexible to accommodate lunch hours, and as a result, the goal would be to ensure that there's at least 30 minutes for homeroom. So we'd like to show you the proposed elective experience and kind of look at a week at a glance, because I think it gives a better idea of what we're really getting into. So we can see here the daily core instruction and 2 periods of electives in a 6-period week at a glance. As you can see in the orange at the bottom of the screen, students receive elective 1 and 2 on an A day and elective 3 and PE on a B day. And this demonstrates our move away from all the different ways we currently offer electives. So we've streamlined them instead of year-long, semester-long, quarter-long, and AB. We're looking at streamlining everything for AB, and it allows a lot more flexibility in the scheduling, and it'll actually grant students more opportunities to be placed in their top choices for electives. And you'll see that both potential middle school schedules offer the same access to electives. So I'm going to ask Kent to move on to the
Sure.
modified.
So the other schedule that we brought last time is the modified block. And so really, when we're looking at this one, this is very similar to certain components of our current schedule. The big change is that what we are moving towards is that block 2 part that you can see up there with math then goes from a single section into the block, providing that extra time there. With the modified block, you still have all 4 courses every single day of the core content area, so you still get that. The big difference is that block 1, as you can see up there, in block 2, the literacy and the math then go for extended periods of time, the 86 minutes, whereas science and social studies is currently status quo across all grade levels. The other piece that's very similar to exactly what Laura said was with our electives. So the elective experiences will go A, B day across the board. So all electives would be on A and B days. So you can see up here that first red box up there, that would be an A day. So you'd have elective 1, and then you'd have elective 2 every single A day. And then when you hit your B day, you'd have your elective 3, and then you'd also have PE. A reminder that PE is one of those classes that is required by state statute. Rob is going to get into some things with like the wheel and some of the other experiences that we've had here in our district in the past, and going over the elective experience and what that can look like.
So as you can see, our current elective structure, last time we came to you, was pretty complex. And if you don't live it every single day, it's what does all of this mean? So we outlined for you the best we could what a year-long class looked like. That happened every day, year-long every other day, semester-long, and then in our for 9 weeks for our 6th graders. Our departments we outlined for you, trying to give you an understanding of what was taking place in art or AVID, business, family consumer ed, and the list that you see on the right side of the screen. As we move forward, those elective pathways, if you put it in a graphic this way, you would see some were running all year, some would run a semester. And the goal is to try to bring this all together so that we can have an efficient system that also aligns with our high school schedule of the A day, B day, looking to make all of our electives flow on that A day, B day calendar. So that would be trying to streamline that system. Briefly before, we talked about what our 7th and 8th grade electives look like, and trying to break it down just a little bit more. We used a time frame as if it was the end of their day. We have that rotating A day and B day schedule, Monday A day, Tuesday B day, and so on. And that is something we've worked with the high school to try to coordinate for the past several years, from day 1 of school all the way to the last day of school. So our A day calendar matches their B day calendar. In a 7th and 8th grade elective experience, what it would look like is on a Monday, they would have one of their electives in one period, in the following period, or sometime throughout the day, they'd have that second elective. On the B day, they would have their third elective, and what's required by statute would be Phi Ed. So all of our seventh graders would have that. Could that look differently for every student? It could, but the idea is they would all have those three electives and then that Phi Ed, which falls under that elective realm. You see that transfers on through the rest of the week. And as we move into sixth grade with the semester electives, there's a little bit more of a change here. Right now, they currently have 9 weeks of an area, art, family, consumer ed, business, tech ed, or a language that they may be involved in. But by moving to the A day, B day to align with the high school, this would allow us, if you look in semester 1, they would have 2 elective experiences during their week. They would have that multiple times throughout the week. And then on that other period that is considered elective, they would have their music choice, band, orchestra, or choir, and then their Phi Ed opportunity, both of those required by state statute. Later, semester 2, mid-January, as we transition into semester 2, you notice their music and Phi Ed would stay consistent. They're continuing to have that all year as required, but what you'll notice is they would move to elective 3 into an elective 4. And again, rather than going 9 weeks consistently, they would make that alteration every other day throughout the course of their week. From there, this gives it an overarching lens. What happens then in our current advisory in our homeroom? This gives you the 30,000-foot lens that all of our students, grades 6 through 8, have during advisory or homeroom. The community building, Avid school-wide instruction, college and career planning, our PBIS system that all of our schools have at the mid-level, our Navigate 360 curriculum, our safety drills, school-wide messaging, and other nuts and bolts that we need to accomplish to establish the daily routines of a middle school life, if you can call it daily routines. Our current advisory, if you look at it up in the orange, is what the year would start to look like. This is what we've done currently during that advisory time. We begin the year with some safety lessons. How do we run our fire drills, our tornado drills, all of those things? How do we keep our kids safe and secure? You'll also notice too that in this week at a glance, Avid school-wide lessons, our PBIS, our behavior expectations, binder checks, assignment reviews, even there could be emails to parents. As we navigate through the course of the year, some of those things become a little bit less. The safety drills aren't something that we have to hit every single week like we do in the beginning of the year to establish those routines, but they are done monthly. But this opens the door for other things of our Navigate 360 lessons. There may be lessons that take more than one advisory period to conclude, so we can do that with this schedule. Our digital citizenship lessons are there, and we continue at the mid-level to continue with our Avid school-wide lessons, organization, utilizing notes, preparing for tests, assessments, projects, things of that nature. As we move into the new schedule structures, either the 6-period day or the modified block, what it's going to allow us to do is extend that homeroom advisory time. If you look on the left side of the screen, all of our students would have that opportunity for Avid school-wide lessons, career and college planning, Navigate 360 curriculum, our digital citizenship, our safety and daily routines that we would do. On the right side of the screen, you're going to see what might be added for students needing additional support, either enrichment or support. And these things would happen 4 times a week. Could be literacy, tiered pre-teaching, math pre-teaching, or could take students beyond their grade level current products. This could also be some other things added in there in our elective experience, and these are things that would be developed as we move into these schedule structures.
Just speaking to that last slide, I just want to make a few connections that as students progress from elementary with reading plans, we have to think about when and where those intervention services may be. This is where the team is talking about potentially that could be in that homeroom advisory. Currently, right now, they are doing some of this that is listed on the left, but it's really a limited time. I think it's 20.
About 20 minutes. The new schedule structure would allow us to expand it to provide more support and more enhancement to what we're currently doing. Ultimately, higher student achievement, higher student engagement, and the things that they want to be a part of.
But I just wanted to point out that we are doing, these things already. But as you know, middle schoolers, 20 minutes with the bell ringing, there's sometimes not a lot of time. What I wanted to point out here, just at this point in the presentation, is everything that we brought forward. The idea is talking about the one schedule that potentially has an earlier start time and the duration of the school day is looked at. And as we know, besides middle school, we have our work around the whole school district, which is optimizing our future. And so rather than come forward here in further discussion tonight and in the future around a middle school schedule that ties us into a start time or duration of the school day, what I'd like to do is let's separate and have the conversation of what does the schedule look like, and then as we progress through our optimizing our future work, to then circle back around that start time and duration, because with that start time, that when we brought this information forward, we had just had some preliminary conversations around busing and transportation. And depending on how things go with optimizing our future, that could all change as far as the busing and transportation. And so I just thought for the reason for tonight, as we have more conversation, it might be easiest just to separate those two. And then when we're talking about the schedule, could we ultimately make the modified block work in the current time we have? Sure. Could we extend it? Sure, that could be a possibility. But I think if we have more conversation of both of those schedules and then come back to the start time and duration of the middle school day with the optimizing our future, that'd probably be most effective. What the team's going to do now is share with you what they've done since our meeting and just the input that's been gathered. So
the work continued beyond. The last time we came, we presented to you the group that came together from all of our sites to come to work on this together. We've taken that even further. We brought that back to our whole building teams, all of our teaching staff, throughout a process where they were informed by the teams that we had each brought to the table. This group of professionals, not only the team that presented, but the team that received that presentation, have been just extremely collaborative, professional, looking at what is the best opportunity. I can't thank the group enough, and to make themselves vulnerable to be leaders and to share what is different and what could possibly bring emotion. The staff have been incredible with each other. Some of the themes that came from all of that work together, the staff really looked at the sufficient time for the universal instruction in math. They wanted to make sure that it could be delivered with fidelity and integrity. Committing to teacher preparation time to analyze data, to utilize that process to ensure that we're instructing in the ways that we need to and lifting kids the way we need to, or pushing kids further if we can. Being able to facilitate both support and enrichment without compromising the elective process was something that was a theme that the group really liked. Trying to get away from haves or have-nots, who can access something, who cannot, making it accessible to all. That has been a huge push of all of our buildings, of all of our sites, to do that. They also like the A-Day, B-Day that offers students an opportunity to stay in their high-interest, high-commitment electives. Middle school kids, sometimes we can get into the point of, yeah, it's first semester, it's done, it's over. Now I'm into something that maybe I'm not quite as interested in. This allows some flexibility and hopefully keeps them engaged. Something they like every single day, all year long. Some of the teachers, there were some questions that came out, and anytime there's change, there are questions. And what they're looking for is some more detailed information about that structure and practice in homeroom. Wanting to make sure that it is something that is delivered with integrity and fidelity and has the impact that we want it to have. They want to be sure that they're doing the best they can in teaching to the talents that they have, in being able to do that. And that's the work of the team and of ourselves to be able to make that product the best it can possibly be.
So we also took some time to gather feedback from our parents, and we wanted to start with our Parent Advisory Council, but we also wanted to reach out beyond that. And we were able to gather multiple families across all 3 sites, and we engaged them in some learning as well, similar to what our teachers did, but a little lighter, so that they really had an understanding of what the current schedule was and what those details of how the electives function and all of that works. And so we were able to bring them together and then share that as well as gather their feedback on those schedules once they learned that information. We had representation from all areas, our personalized learning groups, our dual language, 6th and 7th and 8th grade. And the themes really that came out from the families was that they favored that additional time for math instruction. We had some really good conversation around that. There was enthusiasm for experiencing that elective wheel and having as many electives as possible during their experience. I mean, really ultimately express confidence in our recommendation moving forward. They were really, and they encouraged us to consider instructionally, like integrating movement, intentional movement during the block, because middle schoolers need that, and that long extended time just sitting can be tough. But it was a really great conversation. So now that you've seen all the feedback, we're going to have Dee just summarize the 2 schedule options.
Just kidding, I'm going to jump in here. So just kind of big picture, what we've tried to share between last time and this time is the historical work that has been done throughout our system around the middle school schedule. Share with you our process that we've went through, really mimicking the success that the high school had, bringing 2 schedule options that the teachers are supportive of. Yes, they may think one is a little bit better, but really these 2 schedules, the team of educators felt comfortable with moving forward. And then really talking about that elective pathway and what that would look like with an A and B day schedule. And so as far as our next steps, what we want to do is have conversation tonight and get additional feedback and conversation from this group, and then also continue throughout the summer, potentially investigating and spending a little bit more time on what that elective pathway may look like. We have some different ideas, but we haven't spent a significant amount of time in that area. And then we also want to give some time to the optimizing our future work so that we can come back and revisit that transportation and start time as a whole. Based on some conversations, we would potentially come back in August or September, potentially seeking a decision or action around a middle school schedule. But again, conversation tonight will help guide us. And then at any point, we're already starting to plan, like if this, then this, thinking of lessons that we've learned from the high school, like having a practice week and that sort of thing. So while some of these schedule changes are not as significant as what the high school experienced, we want to just be sure that our educators are prepared and feel the best for any possible transition that may happen. So with that, we'll open it up for discussion, talk more about whatever details you would like to know, more about the options or current state.
Thanks, this was good. So if I take a look back at where we started, so 8th grade math was kind of the centerpiece that we started to identify that we're not giving them enough fundamental time in math. I love the approach with the electives. I think that makes a lot of sense, and not to mention, we mentioned the student efficiency, but it's also staffing, because we can best plan. There's synergies that cover all of those. I would be interested in hearing your feedback on what model you guys like better, because ultimately that is really where the important piece comes to that. But before I ask, we have to ask. The kind of outlier for me is honestly this homeroom advisory period. And I will tell you insight from students when we ask, it's, I'm bored, we don't do anything, I don't know why we do it. And I want to make sure that if we're dedicating, because in one model it's 33 minutes, and the other model it's 38 minutes, and then we're starting to talk about the need for additional time on interventions or support or outreach, which I think is really important. But the use of the advisory time, and I think Mrs. Koenig was commenting on this the last time, is it just needs to be so clear as to what value that the students are getting out of it, because the teachers, even in their feedback, are saying, what's my expectation? What's the value add to both sides? And so for me, I'm still kind of unclear on what that is, but I do I would love to hear what you guys are initially thinking at this point as recommending for a model. Because this is the world, you guys know more than we do.
I don't think we've discussed it as a team. We're really weighing the pros and cons, I think, just as you all are, and taking a look at what might be possible. I don't think we have all of the information. I think the information is going to be exhaustive, and you can have different perspectives during the entire process. I do think our next step is to do more specific pointed work around homeroom and what the AB elective pathways are going to be through 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. We will come to consensus around a recommendation, however, for one of these schedules.
I know you want more than that, so since I've taught in all the different models and led in the different models, since they didn't tease me about the historical perspective today, but the one that I would want, that we would want, I think I can speak for the whole group, is the one that we can set up our staff most successfully for. And that's going to take time to develop the professional development and how we utilize minutes, how we're continuing to build the use of our curriculum that we have. And the big piece was the staff were very confident that either one, the curricular models we have can be implemented in both with fidelity and integrity. So our job then, whichever one is chosen, I'm most comfortable with, the one that we can set up our staffs the most success with.
It's a very well-polished answer, so thank you. I will say you guys are CEOs of your schools, and it's really important from my perspective that we understand what is going to be most impactful for you and your staff. And without hearing what you guys really want, I don't think we would be asking the right questions, so stay tuned.
Mrs. Koenig?
Thank you. Thanks for all this information and work you guys are doing. This is, I love the evolution of how this is going. I do have to echo Ms. Kozlowski's concern, though. I have heard it, I lived it, and I have heard it, that period, it's not something a lot of students find intense value with. So I would let you know, again, if we're looking at that, maybe restructuring what is going to be covered in that at that time, because we're going from 32 to 38 minutes. That's a long time. That's almost an entire block. I was wondering, when did it go from 1 day a week to 5 days a week? Is it currently still 1 day?
It's 5 days a week.
When did that change? Because when we had the flex period back in 2019, it was 1 day a week we had this time. When did that change? I'm just curious.
2023, right, is when you put the, In 2023, there began to be coordination amongst this team to create a guaranteed and viable experience. So you're seeing in each of the buildings that during the first week of October, everyone is doing safety drills, everyone is doing 2 specific AVID lessons for the entire building so that all students get access to AVID. They might have a similar routine around doing binder checks and really focusing on student organization and being able to set goals, revising the assignments they had during the week, making sure they're complete, that they're setting goals for the next week. Those common experiences are fresh, 2 years. I would say, though, there's a slight shift in Navigate 360 moving forward to more focused instruction from the teacher and less independent work time. That's going to create a scenario in which there is more opportunity for collaboration and application, which we're very excited about, but that will take more than 20 minutes to accomplish.
Sure, okay. Yeah, because I know that 1 period a week was grueling for a lot of kids, and suddenly I was unaware it was 5 days a week, so I'm just wondering how a lot of them are processing, that amount of time. But I like the idea of using it for, things that are extremely valuable and, continue to move them, academically, and that they buy into it. The important thing is the students have to feel that that is a time that they're benefiting from, too. So that it all comes together to make that work, so.
One of the things that I think will help build it too is our Navigate data has really shown growth in what kids have been able to accomplish in terms of goal setting, academic success. And we've done a beginning, middle, and end of year, and you can see the growth monumentally amongst grade levels. So that is something that as we become more comfortable in that delivery model, as Dee had mentioned about some teacher-led, it's really going to hone in on those skills or needs. It's also going to allow us the time as we develop it to really hit the sweet spot where kids need that extra support or the enrichment? Can they get to art? Can they get to music? Can they do those other things that maybe they don't have time to do all of the time? And it might even give us an opportunity where some kids don't have access to some of those things because of transportation or whatever. We can be able to build that into the school day. So not every student has access to those things.
And that's where the buy-in's going to come in. It's got to be personally meaningful for the students. Instead of universal, you're all going to get this.
Yep.
It has to be something that each student feels that I need this, or, well, why am I doing this? This is a waste of time. That's going to be the craft of trying to.
That's where the
something to
art of the
benefit everyone.
teacher is going to come in too, because every teacher we have has an intangible skill that not every other teacher has. And can we
Right.
align those students with those teachers who can motivate, inspire, keep them interested, keep them involved? And that's the goal that when we really get to the heart of the work, that's where that action takes place.
Right. Awesome, thank you.
All right. Grateful for the work. I'm grateful that you stayed so late. I'm sorry that you have to start so early. I do, I think it will be difficult to, I mean, we talk about the start and end, but the thoughtfulness that you've put into all the stuff is that's the important part. I do think that it would be very difficult to talk start and end without talking about the optimizing the future, without talking about, you're trying to fit this into the box of all the transportation limitations. We may need to talk about high school. We may need to talk about elementary school. So I do want to encourage this team and the administrative team to think about how do we get the extra time in the day. We have everything's on the table right now. Like we're doing something that's very strategic district-wide. And so I just think we have to be open to things that might need to push or pull in another direction. We're not a district that has the ability to have high school and middle school and elementary school all start at the same time because we have 22 different locations. So we have that limitation of moving 6,000 or so students around on buses every day. So that's real. But these are short days that our middle schoolers have. And it was brought up earlier, but 7th to 12th have the same requirements in terms of, the amount of time that we're spending with our students. And so I think we have to really think about that and make sure the time is productive, but that we can also get the kids where they need to be. And that might mean we have to look at other buildings. So I think everything's on the table at this point. Yeah, I'll leave it at that. Anything else? Okay. Everybody's still awake. This is good. The rain has stopped, so we can all get home safely.
We really appreciate the conversation. This has been, all of these topics are really great, and end of the year, lots of good celebrations. But kudos to the middle school team of leaders here, but also the educator leaders that have been part of this work and then who are standing up in their building and explaining their thinking to others. It's just been a great process where the educator voice has been a part of it and helping to guide this to where we are here. So we'll continue to collaborate, and we just appreciate the conversation and guidance of kind of your thinking and where to go from here, especially with all of our optimizing the future conversations that we'll have ongoing in the summer.
Well, thank you very much. Appreciate it. All right. Are there any recommendations for future meetings? Okay. With that, right on cue. Our next meeting is Tuesday, August 5th, 7 p.m. here in the boardroom. Otherwise, we'll see everybody next week. Thank you.